Call this meeting to order of, what is today? June 23rd, 2014. Let's see. First item is the public hearing. I'm wondering if, wonder if we should wait to do that till the others arrive. What do people feel about that?
Probably makes sense.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna let's go like give 5 more minutes to the other board members to show up. And then, in fact, that might be them right there. There's one. Do we have any other business or new business updates you wanna talk about?
The other big update for me to share is that Liquor Junction is gonna be opening on Thursday. Liquor Junction.
The old wine
Is that taking the place of the wine bunker?
bunker.
In place of the wine bunker, in the new end space.
Yeah.
You might recall, we had the plan for a little bit of the changes going on over there, one general way. So, the speed table is in, and, drove it today.
That was quick.
Yep.
I mean, I was down there within the last week or so, and it was just same.
Yep. The sign is up for the liquor store, and it's massive. I don't recall exactly how many square feet, but it's huge.
Well, didn't they, the previous owner had said put part of the space away, right? And didn't that space come back? Isn't it actually larger because he voluntarily, am I remembering? The inside.
The inside.
Voluntarily said he would do a smaller store, I thought.
Yeah, they've subdivided that area.
Okay.
Yep, Dana's Properties, but this is a very, much larger than the closed,
Yeah, the wine bunker.
wine bunker, yeah.
Was,
Oh, so they take
In the corner.
more space.
so it's this is in the, where the old Frugal Families used to be.
yes,
Oh,
exactly.
okay. Oh, it's totally different. Gotcha.
Totally different
Okay.
location,
Okay.
Bigger.
bigger.
Yeah, what? Those are small.
I don't know, maybe it just looked bigger, but it's
pretty
Well,
it's
not-
massive.
It's funny.
Not
Yeah.
bigger than Frugal Fannies.
No. I think they
And-
still have the men's sitting area as well, for those of you that might recall Frugal Fanny. They had a men's area
Right.
where men could sit,
Huh.
husbands could sit, well,
And what about our favorite place on Main Street? Well, my Perfectos, thank you.
Perfectos, they've come in and dropped a few pieces of paper off, but
Mhm.
they're not in any position to get a building permit yet.
Okay.
But, I mean, the
They're
interesting one.
close.
Yeah.
The interesting one is that they've moved the equipment in where Dave and Buster's are going in next to the Northern Bank building in Woburn.
The equipment,
Well, the old, what used to be the Logan Express,
Okay.
has been sitting idle. That's the lot where Dave and
Oh.
Buster's was
Oh, okay.
approved.
Oh,
And they've
okay.
actually started doing some work
Oh.
there.
Okay.
yeah.
Construction equipment, not.
Got it. And Bunratty's, that was the other one I was gonna ask about.
Yeah, I guess there's been some more activity. I did talk to one of the owners,
Yep.
and I said, what do I tell people when they ask me, what's the prognosis for when you're gonna open?
Yep.
And he said soon,
Soon, okay. And that was it.
and that was the extent
All
of it.
right. So soon, so the update is soon.
They're coming.
All right, they're coming.
Coming.
Posted a rather unprofessional comment on Facebook.
Oh,
Who did?
Somebody from Bunratty's on the Facebook page, and people responded they're not pleased with that post at all. Or should they be? It's completely out of line, in my opinion.
I'm glad I missed it.
Yeah, no, I was with my wife at Starbucks. She goes, "Look at this." I'm like, what are you doing?
yeah.
So,
The outdoor patio looks so nice. The,
yeah,
the concept, I think, is a really good concept. All they have to do is
I
open.
think she's just probably, or not, it may not have been her, but a lot of pressure to get open. So,
All right.
mistake.
Why don't we go ahead now? do it. Now we have Nick, at least. See if he'll join us. All right, so the first item on the agenda is the public hearing for a scenic roads application at 181 South Street. Do you want to read the public notice?
Yeah, sure. Public hearing legal notice. Notice of a public hearing is hereby given under Article 8.2 Scenic Roads of the General Bylaws of the Town of Reading and the Community Planning and Development Commission, CPDC. Scenic Road Regulations adopted August 1991. The CPDC will hold a public hearing on Monday, June 23rd, 2014 at 7:30 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room of Reading Town Hall, 16 Lowell Street, to consider a request by Tom Wise, owner of 181 South Street, to construct a second driveway at 181 South Street, map 3, lot 13. The new driveway is being constructed to accommodate access to a proposed accessory apartment. South Street is a designated scenic road which requires CPDC review for work proposed in the right-of-way. A copy of the application and associated material is available to the public in the Community Services Department in Town Hall, Monday through Thursday, from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and until 7 p.m. on Tuesdays. Reading Community Planning and Development Commission.
Great, thank you. Okay, so a public hearing, if you haven't been involved in one, what we do is we will ask staff to introduce it. We'll turn to the applicant, at which time then the board may deliberate a little bit, but then we'll open up for public comment, which time the public is invited to comment. And then at the conclusion of that, we'll either decide to close the public hearing, or if we feel there's more to discuss and review, we'll continue it to a subsequent meeting. So if I'd also ask if anybody hasn't already signed in the back, if you could do that, that would be helpful. And with that, Jean, do you want to introduce
Sure.
us and tell us a little about this?
So Mr. Weiss is proposing an accessory living area that will be before the Zoning Board of Appeals July 10th. So that's one component going forward. He's been through the Conservation Commission, and that's in your packet. They have given him the required approvals. And so tonight, this is before you, basically because of the second driveway request. Under the scenic road regulations, the issue comes up that this really triggers those regs. And so I guess what's before the board is to make a determination based on the plan that's proposed, and I can pull that up, as to whether or not this is something it's gonna be in conformance with the regs. So I can let Mr. Wise, present it a little bit
Yeah,
further.
before we get into that though, Jean, can you tell us, I mean, this, I know I think we've touched on scenic roads here a little bit, at different times, but never anything of particular, that we really delved into in any
Yeah,
particular
I know, they
way.
don't come along that often.
Can you, at least for my benefit, sort of help educate me a little bit about this whole scenic road
I
part
think
and
the
what
intent,
makes this different than other parts of the
Yeah.
code?
the
or other
intent
places
of the
in
scenic
town?
road regulations, as I interpret it, is really, one of preserving the character of these areas. We have 3 of them in town: Walnut Street, South Street, and the third one's gonna escape me, but it's in that general area. So they've been before this board for, trees, driveways, anything that would affect the character of this quote-unquote scenic road.
So it's a higher level of standard with respect to the
Correct.
tree than other
Yep.
places, okay.
Well, it's also, I mean, candidly, it's a way to get relief from some of the state roadway regulations. You know, so it allows the town to spend grant money on the road maintenance in spite of the fact that they are below state minimums for roadway width and right-of-way.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ready for me?
Yes.
Tom Wise, I'm representing myself. So before you, and some of you had a chance to read some of it as you were sitting down, but I've submitted my scenic way request. Per section 5.1 of the Reading Scenic Way Road Regulations, permit must be filed whenever a person, organization, public agency, etc., proposing the cutting or removal of any tree, the moving, alteration, tearing down, or destruction of any stone wall or portion thereof, or any other feature within the public right-of-way, only within the public right-of-way, which contributes to the character or quality of the scenic road, in connection with any repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving work, shall first obtain the written consent of the CPDC by filing a request for such work. So the specific focus of today is anything that's within the public right-of-way, which basically is grass. There was, however, a large shade tree on the corner of my lot, which you'll hear more about today, that is and has been determined by the town of engineering to be on private property. That, you have that answer also in your packet. I believe George distributed that beforehand. Finally, this was through the Board of Selectmen. Jean did not mention that. I think there's some discussion about that, but this did go through the Board of Selectmen earlier this year as well, as they had initial right over driveways and curb cuts. The only place they don't have full right is when it comes to a scenic way, is my understanding.
But if I could just jump in, didn't the plan change since then?
The plan has not changed other than moving the house a foot.
I
No
think we had
change
some
to the
issues
house.
with the Board of Selectmen, but we can
There
talk
has been
about
no
that.
change to the plan other than changing the front door and cutting it in by a foot. That's the only change to the plan.
The end of the addition,
What's that?
the end of the addition.
The side of the addition. So if you could, I don't have the picture with me. I could, actually I might have an old one with me, but if you could picture, in fact I will pull out an old one because it will help you with the discussion. So what you have here, may I approach?
Sure.
Okay. What you have here is the old plan. The new garage that's going in, the existing or additional mudroom that's there. The house is being raised up from a cape to a colonial, and the addition in question is over here. So what's changing in this plan, Mr. Tuttle, have you seen that? Mr. Hanson, Mr. Sabino? The garage, which will use the existing driveway, the addition is over here. Otherwise, it's a raise from a cape to a colonial. So this is the portion we're discussing, which is the addition on the side. The only change to the plan that's being submitted for the zoning board meeting on July 10th is that front side right there will be enclosed, so it does not look like a front porch, second front porch, which was one of the points of contention at the previous zoning board, which I also believe you have in some of the notes there. And instead of being 14 feet, it's 13 feet. That's it. So no material change in the look, feel, or otherwise access to the house, other than bringing it in by a foot in order to comply with the, bylaws as they are for zoning board related requirements. So that's that. Any questions on that before I proceed?
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I don't, not that we have jurisdiction, but you're expanding the garage, right?
Yes, sir.
Because that picture doesn't look like this, okay.
Yes. We are expanding the garage, which will leverage, it is part of the conversation here because it will use the existing driveway. The existing driveway extends out over the existing garage, and that driveway will then access the second bay of the garage. Okay? So this was before the Board of Selectmen on May 18th, was approved at that time on a 5-0 vote. Scenic way considerations. Another point of note here is there are specific considerations for scenic way to consider. Section 6 outlines those considerations in particular, and there are A through G. The first one is the degree to which the proposed activity would adversely affect the character or quality of the scenic road. The second one is the necessity for the proposed activity in terms of public safety, welfare, or convenience, and the consistency of the proposed activity with adopted townwide traffic, transportation, or safety plans, programs, or policies. The third is compensatory actions proposed, such as replacement of trees, stone walls, or significant features.
Excuse me.
The fourth is availability of reasonable alternatives to the proposed activity, which could reduce or eliminate anticipated damage to trees, stone walls, or other significant features. The fifth is whether the proposed activity would compromise, harm other environmental or historical values or features. The sixth is whether the proposed activity would adversely affect the preservation of irreplaceable or sensitive natural resources. And the seventh is consistency of the proposed activity, basically with the town plans. You can all see that in that section there. So the first, I'll walk through some of these. If I'm going in too much detail, please tell me to move on, and I'll be happy to. The first one is the character or quality of the scenic road. Our intention here is to have a high-quality driveway. We're not planning to just throw rocks on the ground or anything else along those lines. The driveway will comply with the standards. It'll be a 12-foot wide entrance at max, of which 10 foot will be paved and 1 foot on each side will be crushed stone. That 1 foot on each side was part of the Conservation Commission submission. It was part of the getting their approval, and it will allow for drainage off the side of the driveway instead of going into the public related street. So we'll have crushed stone, asphalt, crushed stone. In addition to that, from a character or quality of the scenic road perspective, as one would do when they're looking through something like this, I went down the streets. Two of the streets Gene mentioned, South and Walnut Street. You go down the streets and you look at other houses and see what's there. In your packet, I've listed 3. There are at least three additional ones that I did not list in the packet. Two of which I was able to take a bit of a picture of today, if anybody would like to see that. The first one is on 124 Walnut Street, which you can see on page 5 of the packet. You can see this one has a driveway into a garage that's under the house, and a second driveway on the side. The second one in the packet is on 47 Walnut Street. That property has an entryway on 2 streets, which is Walnut and Curtis. You see a driveway on curb cuts on both sides. The third one, the picture's not as good and it's a little fuzzier. That one is at 47 Walnut Street, that's that one. Apologies, the first one is 336 South, the second one is 124 Walnut, the third one is 47 Walnut. In addition to that, there's another one on the corner of Red Farm and Walnut, and there's 2 right down the street from that. And there's another one right next door to 47 Walnut, which has an entrance on Holly Road. So it has 2 driveways as well. So from a character perspective and consistency with the street, it's well within the consistency of the street to have up to 2 curb cuts. In terms of the necessity, before I move on, any questions on that? In terms of the necessity, the reason for the entire work we're discussing and the reason why I'm spending hours upon hours meeting with Reading boards is that my parents, my wife's parents in particular, are coming close to retirement age and they just don't have money. They don't have money to support themselves. They'd have to move out of the state, if not out of the country. So we're looking to have them move in. In particular, my mother-in-law is suffering from osteoarthritis. The doctor has said she needs to live on a single-family dwelling. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. And her mobility is getting worse by the day. We'll review other alternatives that we considered as we went through this process as well to show what other ideas we had as we were going through it. In terms of the consistency, again, I've discussed that before about the consistency with the overall road and how things go around things as they are around the rest of the town. South and Walnut Street, there are other houses in the general neighborhood as well that have more than one curb cut. So there's plenty of consistency. In terms of compensatory actions, my neighbor, Mr. Webb, who's actually here as well to represent his side, and his wife have expressed concern about the tree that's on the corner of my lot. As mentioned before, it has been determined that it is my tree. And what I'd like to do, or what I propose to do as part of the zoning board and as part of this, is while I do need that to come down, I am more than prepared to put back other trees to separate and or compensate as necessary. We mentioned the tree coming down as part of the Reading Conservation Commission as well. They saw it, they knew it, they did not judge it as any sort of conservation related need on their side or any sort of other historical feature or anything else along those lines. Alternatives considered. We heavily looked at 3 different options. The first one, first of all, with the new garage going in, we don't believe the existing driveway will be sufficient without backing up, backing in, backing up, backing in. My children are younger, so presumably they come forward. If we're able to afford a car for them as well, it would get even more complicated. So what we looked at were alternatives from a driveway perspective. The first one was to expand the existing driveway as it is. If you can look in Appendix C, you see the pictures of the driveway. And what you'll also notice in that is that on the left-hand side of the driveway is a rock wall formation. Now that rock wall is perfectly within the bounds of this commission, and that is something we did not want to disturb. However, we feel like it would have been necessary to add the additional parking if we did do that. And in doing so, we feel like we would have had to shore that up, and that rock wall would have been damaged and or replaced as a result of the work. Further, this driveway is much closer to the wetland side of the house, which has previously been reviewed with the Conservation Commission. It is closer to the 100-foot barrier of the wetlands that we're talking about, and therefore we'd like to avoid any further work on that side if we can. And as we mentioned before, my mother and my mother-in-law and her osteoarthritis is also a concern, as that would be moving their parking even further away from their proposed dwelling. From that perspective, we considered option 1 non-tenable. Option 2, we considered putting a circular drive in front of the house. As such, we thought, that way we wouldn't have to knock down the tree. We wouldn't have to do anything else along those lines. However, as you can see also in Appendix D, the house is right at the corner of South and Walnut. And if anybody lives around there, which I believe a couple of you do, that is a high traffic area, and people come down that corner of South sometimes pretty quickly. Our concern was if we made a circular driveway, they may consider the driveway an extension of the road and therefore cause problems. I think this is validated a bit by George Zamboris' review of the proposal, saying that it would not impact problems. The new one, the proposal versus the circular driveway, would not impact traffic, whereas if you put a circular driveway right in front of the house at the end of that curve, we feel like it would be a danger both to us and the public. The last one was to explore what we're proposing, which is to put the driveway on the right-hand side, still well within our property, just on the right-hand side of the addition as it stands. The tree in question, which has been determined to be on our property, would be impacted by that, but again, we'd be willing to put back other boundary trees or bushes or whatever was determined to be appropriate. In terms of harm to other environmental or historical features, as mentioned before, we don't want to impact the historical features of the rock wall on the left-hand side of the house where the existing driveway is. We've also, in terms of environmental perspective, again, with the Conservation Commission, have reviewed that this tree would be coming out, and they were aware of that, and we're okay with that from an environmental perspective. Preservation of irreplaceable or sensitive natural resources. I refer again to the Reading Conservation Commission's review, as that seems to me to be appropriate review from a natural resource perspective. Consistency of proposed activity within town plans or policies. Again, I went around town. I found a couple of examples that just within more or less the Joshua Eaton School District area, maybe a little bit of Barrows, to see some houses that have multiple driveways to show consistency with other housing structures as it exists. With that said, that's more or less my petition. And if anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns, I'm happy to address them.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I just pulled up the actual, these are the scenic road regulations that the CPDC adopted. And if it's helpful, the part that is most, I think most is the criteria.
Basket.
Sorry.
It's the second to last page.
Thank you.
Yep, section 16.
Here we go.
There it is.
That criteria is copied word for word in the petition as well.
So this is more or less what's been used in the past in evaluating these kinds of requests.
Okay. And so on our table here, we have this letter. This was submitted this evening?
Yes.
Okay. So is this part of the public comment period, or this is, how do we,
If they've asked for it to be entered into the record of the
Okay.
public hearing.
okay. So before we get into this, do we have any questions for the applicant here?
Questions, I don't know about questions. I'll say to you what I've said to ZBA before, when they cite examples, sometimes those examples are installed illegally, or they aren't conforming, or there's no history on how they happened, and so it's dangerous to say that that's the precedent. I don't know that that's relevant, I'm saying that's one thing I'm cautious with.
I hear that, and I was, having gone through the case history of ZBAs for the last 8 years, I'm well attuned to that or concerned about that. However, I think the preponderance of them means that they're not all violating, in my mind. I could be wrong, but there are a significant number of them on the streets,
Yeah, I think people
Walnut and South.
can just put them in, but.
Okay. All right. We're up for public comment?
Well, this is complicated from a jurisdictional point of view. I mean, you know, because you've been talking to everybody. It's complicated for us. And as it was mentioned in one of the replies, and I've forgotten offhand exactly who said it, the zoning advisory committee work in progress also would impact on some of the elements of this proposal.
Do you have a street view of this house?
I can, yeah.
So I mean, I understand everything that's being proposed and what the other boards have said about it. And I really am not sure what to do with the whole thing. My first reaction is put the addition on the other side. Forget the second driveway. I mean, and there's probably a very good reason why you didn't do that. But you're doing the, substantial rework of the existing house, going from the single-family cape up to a two-story colonial. And if you expand the garage and you put basically a walkway where you have the so-called mudroom, I mean, it would give you access to an arbitrarily large addition in the rear of the house and would not require the extra driveway.
Address that question in particular?
If you would like. I mean, I have no jurisdiction to, other than, it looks like it would be an easier thing to do.
So that was one idea we definitely considered. However, and you can sort of see the lines on the plot plan, but where you start to get into problems with that is that now you significantly encroach on the 100-foot barrier of the conservation land. If you were to push back the garage and say build on top of that and build back as you're suggesting, the 100-foot barrier will definitely come into play. You will also most likely come into a 15-foot breach on the side of the house as well, unless you really to twist it in which case you're still facing most likely an encumbrance of the 100-foot barrier of the conservation land. So unless you get really creative and basically wrap it, yeah.
I mean, according to this, it looks like if you just put the addition here, you don't run into the 100-foot line.
And directly behind the house?
Well, just, between the corner of the garage and whatever, yeah.
And I mean, the other part about that, and this is also up for consideration for the zoning board, as you know from some of our other conversations, is that addition right there is not part of, we got all sorts of other issues. The convolution of some of the different bylaws makes all of this very complicated,
Yes,
very complicated.
I understand that. The fact that there are, well, with the draft language we have in the zoning advisory committee at the moment, you appear to have already two separate entrances. You've got the breezeway entrance and the primary entrance. And there's the preference, if you will, would be to use the existing second entrance rather than create a third, which is what you're proposing, I believe.
Well, I mean, yes, I am proposing to create a third, but it will be on the side, it will not be in the front. And that is part of the discussions as well. Is it in the front? Is it a frontal entrance? Or is it the side? In this case, what we're proposing is that it be on the side, and therefore would be in compliance with that related ruling.
Okay. Next.
So you're, just to make sure I understand that, you're expanding the garage and, like, just trying to get the drawing, so that's your house right there, that's an existing garage?
That's the house with the existing garage, yes.
Okay. Can you scroll, can you go
That's
down
an
the
old
street
Google
down,
Maps picture.
are you able to go around to the other side, to get down by, where the tree is, are we able to get that? Did Google go there? Go Google, all right. Can you give me one more? So, oh,
Well,
and so
you can-
there's,
You can turn.
That's
Where's the
another
tree?
tree,
Can you-
that's
can you
not the
turn?
tree.
no, can you turn, Gene?
How do I back up?
There is a way.
A little, you wanna just turn to the left?
Turn yourself
Nope,
around.
the other way.
Okay,
Do the
Jesse's
hokey
better at
pokey.
the driving.
And then you have to just click the arrow,
Okay.
and then you'll probably right there.
Alright, so
Okay.
that's the tree right there
That's the tree, yeah.
in question?
Mm-hmm.
And where's the property line between your house and the Webb's house?
The property line between my house and the Webb's house is over here. I mean, the best way to look at that is either on the appendix and/or, I mean, on the plot plan and/or in George's submission to you.
Yeah.
It's not real clear on there. But George's submission to you has some lines and the plot plan has other lines.
Yeah.
Has basically the same lines.
That driveway is right at that intersection.
No,
It's not at the intersection.
It's
the
distorted.
Y, the
Yeah,
crotch
it's
of
here.
the Y is actually
Yeah.
kind of where you're standing for the
Yeah,
house
yeah.
that's on the corner.
The tree is there.
And if you switch back to the submission, you see a good picture from up South Street that will actually show you.
Shirley?
Yeah. This aerial actually seems to suggest you have enough room to the right of the tree almost, but.
Well, only if there's no addition there, yeah.
There will not be enough room to the right of the tree, no. Because that then goes into the Webb's property for sure. If you look at the plot plan, we have about 17.5 feet between the side of the addition and the line. And so the plan, as it stands right now, is to use the driveway there and then replant bushes, trees, whatever is necessary and as agreed to with the Webb's that makes sense
Yeah.
to make that line, to re-implement that line.
See, I'm looking here. This driveway.
Yeah, but it's. Gene, maybe you know, somewhere I had been told, and that doesn't mean that it's true, that there was a minimum setback between the property line and the driveway, the pavement of a driveway. Yeah,
There's not.
I don't
I've been told that it's a 5-foot minimum, but I mean, as I say, I don't know that that's true. I couldn't find it anywhere.
I think in some cases the building inspector advises
Yeah.
that, just because there can be a discrepancy on where the actual property line is, so sometimes he advises that
Okay.
a 5 foot is could be a
Yeah.
safe route.
I mean, it could have been an artifact of the
Yeah.
development, the subdivision of Heather Drive, which is where I live.
Sure.
So how,
Okay.
so the driveway, I'm sorry, the driveway he wrote in here, how wide is it? It's 10?
12,
The
you said.
plan as it is right now
Yeah,
is to have 1 foot of crushed rock on each side
yeah.
and 10-foot wide driveway. So the driveway itself could be finishing at 11 feet from the house, which would give 6 feet 6 feet 3/4 of a 6 3/4 of a foot on the opposite side of the driveway, or 5 3/4 of a foot on the opposite side of the crushed wall.
Mhm.
Crushed stone.
Say that again?
So if you were to look at this picture here, this driveway, 10 feet,
Yeah,
1 foot of crushed stone,
yeah,
1 foot of crushed stone.
yeah.
You have 17 3/4 of a foot here. You have 17 3/4 of a foot there, from the house to the property line. 17 minus either 11 or minus 12. If it's minus 11, it leads to 6 3/4 foot. If it's minus 12, it leads to 5 3/4 foot. So even though there technically is not a 5-foot rule, it would be within that 5-foot rule.
Yep.
Right, but I guess what I'm getting at is, I mean, I think you already said this, but
Yeah.
maybe we're talking about different things, like, it looks like from this tree, this is the property line right here?
Yeah, that's the property line right there.
Okay, so it almost looks like that could almost be shifted over to this side of the, if you went up right up against the property line, you might be able to get around that tree.
Well,
I mean, I'm willing to consider that. However, I think that would actually be more troublesome, personally, because it comes closer to the property line. The other side of that is this is a large tree. So if you're gonna build a driveway, the roots come up from the tree, the driveway disappears pretty quickly. So there's 2 sides of that I would say are of concern.
Well, I think that, I mean, we're here, the tree is the scenic part of the, that's why you're here, tree.
Well, the only thing I'll say about that, and I think obviously Mr. Webb disagrees, but the tree, when it comes to the question here, it says in the public right-of-way. The tree has been determined to not be in the public right-of-way.
Right.
It also does not, the tree, when it comes to the boundary, as was referred to in the rebuttal portion, is only when it comes to the determination of a scenic road. If you look through sections 1 through 4, it is not with regards to the determination in section 6 of what is being changed.
All right, you have something, Nick? Or you wanna open up?
Yeah, I've got stuff. I live right around the corner. This is actually one of my favorite capes. So I'm sad to see it turned into a sort of a nondescript colonial, which people love for some reason. But people do all kinds of things with their property, and in the past, we had someone come in who took down some trees that someone thought were in the right of way, and they were not, on the scenic route right on Walnut.
Yeah.
And our determination was that it was not within our purview to keep them.
Yep.
So personally, if the applicant is willing to plant new trees, I would plant them on the Webb's property, because then they are guaranteed that no one can ever take them down. It's something I tell people as they come in all the time when they're concerned about development encroaching on their buffer zone. The only guaranteed buffer is if it's on your own property, because I can cut down anything I want on my side of that fence. So if you're growing the tree, no one can really do anything to it. I don't think we have the right to tell them how to configure the house. There are many ways to do it.
Right.
And I don't think we can tell him not to take that tree down. So if he's willing to plant stuff, I would certainly work with the neighbor and plant whatever kind of buffer on their side, and then they have the guarantee of that new tree. What kind of tree is this? Has it been determined?
I don't actually know. Do you know, Mike?
I think it's a maple tree, 30 or 40-year-old maple tree.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Probably, yeah. In excess of 60 feet.
Well, I've lost 2 at least 100-year-old oaks on both corners of my property in the last 10 years. They used to slow down the traffic, but they were right on the roadway.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and one, they just aged and died, so if something gets planted a little further back and is younger, you have some ability to keep it. It's unfortunate if there's nothing you can do. I can't tell you what color to paint your house, and I can't tell you how to arrange your house, and just because I don't like it. I just don't think we can tell them not to do it.
All right, we'll open up for public comment now. And if I get just a couple of things with the comments. One, please state your name and where you're from, your address if you're a resident. And just to keep some civility, we'll have everything addressed to the board. And then if there's a last respond, to respond as and if necessary. So, the applicant, I should say. So, I'm assuming there's some public comment. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Demore, and I'm the person who submitted the response that you now had and read. And I'm here on behalf of Michael and Leanne Webb, who are the abutters at 224 Walnut Street. My address is at 1 International Place in Boston, where I practice law. And I'll get to, with all due respect to what one of the members just said, that there's nothing we can do about this. I completely disagree. There is something you can do about this. You can deny the requested relief because it doesn't meet the requirements of the regulation. First off, keep in mind, the petition here is not to build an accessory apartment. The petition here is to put in a driveway. The accessory apartment issue is going to be dealt with by the board, the zoning board of appeals. And in connection with that building of a second driveway, the petitioner would like to tear down or take down the reason that this area is considered scenic. He said a few moments ago that he was going to keep it scenic by putting in a nice driveway. But I would ask this board to think about which you would consider to be scenic, or which would be in the picture in a Webster's dictionary of the definition of scenic. A driveway with crushed stone on each side, or a beautiful tree, like the tree that is on the property right now. There's been some discussion tonight about what other boards have done. And I think that it's not clear that the information that's been provided is accurate. First, the notice of intent that the Conservation Commission approved was based on drawings that are different than the drawings that are going to be submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and from which the petitioner will get a building permit. So therefore, he's going to have to go back to the zoning board. To the Conservation Commission to get a notice of intent, because that notice of intent is based on the drawings he submitted in February of 2014. Second, the Board of Selectmen, when they voted on the second driveway, it is true that in March they did vote on the second driveway. Here are the problems with that vote. First, public notice was not given that the issue of the second driveway would be on the agenda that night. Therefore, my client didn't have an opportunity to come to that hearing to oppose the second driveway. And when he found out about it, he immediately told the Board of Selectmen, hey, I've got the notice for your meeting for that night, and this was not on the public notice or the agenda. And he was told that not to worry about that, because the plans that had been submitted by the petitioner, and which were the reason for that approval, were being changed in light of comments that the zoning board had made. And that in fact, the town manager had sent an email to the petitioner telling him that approval was based on the plans that were presented to us that night, and we understand that they're going to be changed. And so that approval is null and void, not to mention the fact, as I said a few moments ago, it was approved without the proper public notice, and so therefore is invalid from the get-go. The Zoning Board of Appeals has not ruled on whether or not the accessory apartment is going to be permitted. The hearing will be held on July 10th. Frankly, we think there are plenty of reasons that board is not going to approve it, and won't. And in fact, I've submitted the minutes to the meeting where this issue was discussed, and the decision of the board that occurred shortly thereafter, where they expressed a lot of reservations to the petitioner's plan. And in fact, expressed so many reservations that the petitioner decided to pull the application and have it withdrawn without prejudice, so that he wouldn't be facing a situation where there would be a negative decision, and which would then preclude him from refiling another petition. Getting to the reasons that this board should deny this petition. I think the chair mentioned it when we started. It's a higher standard. The scrutiny that you should give to this petition is a higher scrutiny than you've given to the run-of-the-mill matters that come before the board because of the regulations that were passed by this board in 1991. And I think there are 3 of those regulations that we saw up here a few moments ago that just prevent this from going forward. First is, there's clearly an adverse effect to the character and quality of the scenic road. We've seen that. Oh, by the way, before I go on to this, the tree being a private tree versus a public tree. First off, the evidence of that is a memo from the engineering division in the town. If you look at Mass General Law, Chapter 87, the engineering division of the town has no jurisdiction over whether or not this is a public tree or a private tree. The person that's empowered to make that determination is the tree warden. The tree warden is CC'd on a decision that somebody who has no statutory authority made about whether or not this is a public tree, public shade tree under Chapter 87. And while your regulations talk about trees that are on the public way, I would offer, and I urge you to look at Chapter 87 of the Massachusetts General Laws, which say that it's not just trees on the public way that are affected when the determination is made about whether a tree is a public shade tree. It's trees that are on the public way or the boundaries next to the public way. And this tree is clearly a tree that's on the boundaries next to the public way. And if you look at the pictures that I've submitted, the shade that is given off of this tree goes onto the public way. Hence, public shade tree. So clearly, there will be an adverse effect on the character and quality of this scenic road if you get rid of this majestic tree. And if you look at the regulations that define the kind of trees that this board is trying to protect, like this. They are bordering trees, trees that are of exceptional quality in terms of type, age, specimen size, or spread. Look at that tree. It's the biggest, most beautiful tree in the whole area. So this will clearly adversely affect the character and quality of the scenic road in that area. Second, will it compromise or harm the environmental values and features of the area? Well, I don't know. To me, you cut down a tree for a driveway, strikes me that that's compromising or harming the environmental values and features of that area. You're not replacing that tree with another tree, you're replacing it with an asphalt driveway. Third, it adversely affects the preservation of irreplaceable or sensitive natural resources. Now, I understand that planting a few saplings probably makes this tree not irreplaceable. But I think that's not what the board is talking about in this regulation. That let's cut down all the big trees because we can always throw a few seeds in the ground and hope that they become a tree like that maple someday. And then one of the other criteria that I think some of the members of this board have talked about tonight is, are there any alternatives that could be used to reduce or eliminate these problems? And here there are clearly alternatives. Remember, the only thing we're talking about here is the second driveway. We're not talking about the building of another house, even though that's another alternative, put the house on the other side. The other alternative here is to use the existing driveway that he is already going to widen. He's already putting in another bay to park cars in. Can't his mother or whoever he wants to have use that other bay to park their car? Those are clearly alternatives that can eliminate the need to cut down this tree or build another driveway. In terms of the necessity of this, I heard what the petitioner had to say. First, that there's, what it boils down to me from hearing it is that he needs to build this because someone who doesn't live there now doesn't have the financial means to live somewhere else. I don't think that's a necessity that the board should be properly before the board to consider, because then we could open the door anytime. There's always somebody who doesn't have the financial wherewithal that could be coming before the board. And secondly, that the health of one of his relatives. We don't have any evidence about what that is. We don't have any evidence about how severe it is. We don't know if she's working, how old she is. We know that apparently she's still mobile and drives a car because he wants to put a driveway right in front of the door so she can get into her house. If she can drive and go about her business, there's no reason she can't use the existing driveway or the expanded driveway. The only other points that I'd make based on the comments that we heard tonight, and I'm not sure, and I'm sure this is a technicality that can be repaired, that the petitioner is actually the proper petitioner. I think that the property is actually owned by a trust and not by Mr. Wise individually. So he might need to change his application to include the record owner of the property if he wants to get any relief. Another point is, despite what Mr. Wise has said tonight, nothing has been agreed to by the Webbs about this work or anything to do with the property. Mr. Wise did go over and speak to Mrs. Webb about this, but as she said in an email responding to Mr. Wise, when he said, these are the things we talked about and agreed to, she said, these are not things we've agreed to. You've talked to me about these things, but there's nothing that we've agreed to. Another point, there has been no survey done on this property. All you have in front of you is a plot plan. A plot plan is different than a survey. And if the plot plan is what the engineering division was relying on to decide whether this was a public tree or a private tree, even though they had no business doing that anyway, I would suggest that at a minimum, this board ought to be insisting that a survey be done on the property. In terms of all of the other homes that have 2 driveways, I can't tell you when those homes were built, when those driveways were built, whether they were built before there was even a zoning bylaw in effect in the community. But the fact is that if they were built and were approved a second driveway, doesn't mean that if the mistake was made once, it ought to be made again. And in this case, I really, on behalf of my client, think cutting down that tree and putting a driveway there would be a mistake. And it would violate the regulations that this board is required to enforce in connection with scenic road. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So a couple of things I just follow up on what you were saying. I mean, I think and here I'm going to look for help from my fellow board members and staff. But I think that when you first start off, you were talking to us being asked about putting in a driveway. And I don't think that's what we're being asked. We're looking at the tree, right? Because it's on a scenic route. And
Can I and that's what, can I interrupt you? Because I didn't hear part of the beginning part. I'm not gonna vote on this. I'm gonna abstain. But the way that I read this is that that the tree is really not part of anything to do with, because as long as it's not in the public way, it is not in the jurisdiction of the scenic road regulations.
Right.
So the thing that we're being asked about to opine on is whether the pavement that would be created, not the fact that it's a driveway, that's the board, the Board of Selectmen's opinion, but the fact that that piece, that work within the public way, that's all we can really be concerned about under this, is detrimental to the creation of the scenic road. This is all about work in the public way, and if the tree isn't in the public way, I'm not sure that, I don't understand, that doesn't come into play.
Yeah.
Is that, am I missing
No,
something?
That's,
I mean,
that's where I
Yeah.
was,
Okay,
that's where I was going with that.
all right,
Yeah.
all right.
I mean,
I just wanted to
I
make sure
have the-
I understood.
I have the same view, I guess, that on given the documentation that we've been provided with and the other the information that we have no jurisdiction on this at all.
And whether
And
this
and
is
it-
a.
and it doesn't, we don't have the jurisdiction to approve it, we don't have the jurisdiction to refuse it. Because it basically, it does not impinge on the project. Because it's not in the public way. We're being asked about a curb cut, we don't do curb cuts. You know, it's, I mean, you are unfortunately allowed to pave up to 25% of your property wherever you want to, for whatever purpose.
I think that the petitioner and Mr. Webb would both agree, though, that one of the things that this board has to do is determine that to the extent that that asphalt is going to be coming out into the public way,
But that's-
or touching the public way, that is something the board, because it's a scenic way,
But that's,
that
but
that
that's
touches.
the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, to the best of my knowledge.
Well, I think
Because
under
they're-
your regulations, it's also yours, though. I think the regulations do make it clear that it would be a feature within the public way if you do anything to, put asphalt on the public way or right at the public way. But my point on the tree is, by approving that, you are impacting the removal of that tree.
But we are not, we can't refuse it.
I disagree. Chapter 87
Yes.
of the Mass General Laws, I believe,
But
does permit you to do that.
But I
I
think
know
you're
from-
you're mixing two things together. There are regulations on public shade trees.
Right.
That's separate from scenic, the scenic road regulations. They're two
No,
separate
no,
things.
no, I
Wait,
agree
but,
with
so they may or may not, I have no idea about public shade tree regulations. This may or may not be a public shade tree. And I agree with you that whether it's on right-of-way or not on public right-of-way makes no difference when you're talking about a public shade tree. But that's very different than what is being talked about here. So that's a different procedure that goes along with the tree warden.
Except that I do believe that it is persuasive evidence as to why this changes the character of the scenic road. And is inconsistent with the laws and the bylaws. That this is something that the board ought to consider, that this tree is part of the scenic road. And it would change the character to approve the driveway, which would require the tearing down of the tree. That's my point.
I'd say they're two different actions.
Yeah, I mean, I know from direct personal experience that the fact that the tree warden recommended the species, that he told him where to plant it, that he planted it, that it grew for 30 years, doesn't mean it's a public shade tree. Because my neighbor across the street took him down. And I asked about it, and I was told with, no uncertainty, that it's private property, private tree, it can come or go as they like.
Well, maybe you should have had me as your attorney, because maybe then you would have been able to save those trees.
No, the crane was there pulling it out of the ground before there's no notice at all.
And just, I know we're focused on this particular one, but just a couple of other things you just had mentioned, just so you know too. I mean, you mentioned some issues you may have with the Conservation Commission, the way they did their business, the Board of Selectmen, there may be some issues there, ZBA. Those are all things you have to, unfortunately, have to take up with them. That's not our jurisdiction here,
I
and
totally
all we
agree.
can.
I was just
right.
mentioning those because the petitioner
Right.
mentioned that he had all these approvals.
Right.
As a way of saying,
And-
well, since I have all these other approvals, you should approve too.
And from
when in
our,
fact
right,
he
from our
doesn't.
perspective, whether he has them or doesn't is not germane to how we're gonna make a decision,
Thank
because
you.
it's up to him to make sure he goes through the legal process with each of his boards and gets his approvals, so. And if anything in those changes that was different what he had here, then he would have to come back here, I mean, that's just the way it works, so. Okay, are there other comments from the public? short.
So a couple of things, real quick, because I was trying to take some notes as he went back. He specifically twisted my words, saying that I would say a nice driveway is a good thing for a scenic way. I did say we would be putting in a nice driveway, but I also mentioned, and he left out, to a degree, the fact that we would be replacing the tree with other trees, as we've discussed. So that's one thing. The Conservation Commission and the going back, the letter he spoke of, saying that that is potentially have to be reviewed, although it doesn't sound like it's in your boundary, was a question, not a statement.
Yeah.
The zoning board, you know, as it is, as you were already saying, not relevant to you. The tree warding, I mean, I would ask, I don't know whether Gene or Jesse can address it, but there is the ability for a tree warden to delegate authority, and has potentially that, it could be irrelevant to this hearing, but maybe follow-up conversation. Has that delegation been given to George and the engineering team when it comes to town lines and stuff like that? Maybe. In addition, he mentioned that I was going to already widen the driveway. I'm not widening the driveway. The existing driveway will support the second bay of the garage. There is no additional widening of the existing driveway plan. In fact, that is contrary to my submission, as it would impact walls, rock walls that are of historic significance. As far as the evidence of the health of my mother-in-law, due to HIPAA, that was specifically taken out of your submission by Jesse, but that evidence has been supplied to the town, and if it's necessary, you guys can review it.
Okay.
Finally, as regards to the trust, I'm a trustee of the trust. If necessary, I'll file the necessary legal paperwork to say that as well. It's already on file with the state that I'm a trustee of the trust.
Thank you.
Finally, the survey was done. That's what led to the plot plan. The survey has been completed. That plot plan is stamped by a registered surveyor.
Okay, any other public comments?
That is a stamped plot plan, it's not a registered survey, they're two different things. A plot plan is $150, they come out and say that conforms to the law. A registered land survey, we actually have transoms and they do all the lines of the property. It's two different items.
Can you, just for the record, who you are?
I'm sorry, excuse me, Michael Webb, I'm a butter at 224 Walnut Street.
Thank you. Anything else? Anybody else? George?
Mr. Chairman, only because, just to clarify something, only because there's
Sure.
an issue regarding public tree or private tree. We did run the street line. The street line is the common boundary, obviously, between our property and the residential's property. And we do this as a rule probably about 2 to 3 times a week for the tree warden. And the way the tree warden looks at any, whether it's a public tree or a private tree, is if any portion of the bark at waist high touches or is within the street layout, he determines it a public tree. This tree was 20 inches behind the street line. And that was done by survey about picking up monumentation in the area.
So you feel confident it was a survey that did this?
We did it.
You did it?
My office did it, yes, and I was out there personally.
Okay. Yeah. So these are stamped with a public, with a registered?
Yeah, they are stamped as a plot plan. It's titled plot plan, not registered land survey. There's a difference, there's a big difference between a plot plan and a land survey. You would never be able to determine title to property with a plot plan.
It's irrelevant for this process in the fact that the cutting of that tree is about, would go to the tree warden if it's determined to be a public shade tree. Right?
Right.
I mean, if the town
Right.
engineering says that it's not in the town's right of way,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And whether that's registered or not.
Yep.
So that it's a whole different process. The tree warden.
Right.
Public shade trees.
Okay.
Point of clarification then, are you being asked, and Gene and Jesse, I'm gonna ask you guys, are they being asked to rule on the 5 feet of grass between the street and the property line? Is that essentially what they're being asked to rule on?
Yeah, I would say the feature of the driveway, which obviously the Board of Selectmen has jurisdiction over the driveway, but the part of it within the public way, that isn't in your jurisdiction.
Well, if such a curb cut were to be approved, it would be in our jurisdiction. But currently, there's nothing.
Currently, there's nothing what?
The CPDC has reviewed applications like this in the past for new driveways,
Yep.
relocated driveways. So just on past practice, CPDC has reviewed applications very similar to this.
The most recent one was the one
It was a 51 Walnut.
they were moving, so we built parts of the wall. And on this side of the house, they accessed the house from the back currently. They were impacting some element
Yeah,
that was part of the scenic road.
Yeah, I mean, that was clearly
Right.
work in the scenic roadway. Or
Right, and they were impacting an
borders.
element, not just putting, a piece of asphalt that touches the roadway.
Right.
Because what could you do to that piece of asphalt other than say that the whole driveway doesn't belong? What could you do to make that piece of asphalt more attractive? What, require granite curbs? What could you do?
Right,
Other than
Right.
say it just doesn't belong at all?
right,
And I don't know that we can't say that it doesn't belong
Right.
at all.
I can't. Okay. All right, any other public comment? Are we ready to close it?
Move that the
Yeah.
CPDC close the public hearing for the scenic way proposal for 181 South Street.
Second.
All those in favor of closing the meeting? Public hearing, I should say. All right. Yeah, he's abstaining.
Okay.
So I'm confused. Is there anything, I don't think I'm alone. Is there anything we can approve? I keep hearing that it's out of our jurisdiction.
Uh,
What are we voting?
It's a small, I think it's a small patch of pavement we're approving at the end of the, we're not approving at the end of the driveway, right? I mean, that's all that we're doing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I just pulled up the regulations again, if these are helpful, and highlighting the procedure for obtaining permits for activities proposed within a public right-of-way. And as we've been discussing, the feature that's being proposed within the right-of-way is that asphalt
Yeah.
related to the driveway, not approval of the driveway,
Right,
not the issue related to the tree, but the fact that there is now an alteration that impacts the public right-of-way or the scenic road. That's what's before the board.
right.
Make any sense?
Right.
Because how do we have jurisdiction to say that the driveway is appropriate when we can't approve the driveway? It's the Board of Selectmen's purview. I don't see how that makes any sense. That we're approving,
Should be done in the reverse, right? Where the board approves the driveway and then we would approve the,
configuration or
Configure the
something, if there was
consistent,
some
yeah.
better way to locate it, then potentially. But even then, limited to what?
I mean, can be done in reverse. Conditioned upon.
Well, yeah, we could condition it upon the approval by the Board of Selectmen, and that might be the only way to get out of this deadlock.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see, we had a draft.
Yes.
Close the hearing, but if the ZBA isn't approved, I have no intention of putting this driveway. Doesn't make any sense, right?
We understand.
Right, so you need to put that condition on it as well. No intention of putting the driveway. If the ZBA isn't approved. You haven't made one.
Why is it immaterial?
If
Three.
if
We have, well,
he
there's,
builds a
Right in front of me. Yep.
driveway or not,
Thank you.
based on doing the addition or not. That's two different decisions.
All right, where's the decision here? Wait, where is it? Is it page 30? Is it separate?
Of your desk packet.
here.
Yeah.
Great.
Another one.
Yeah, thank you. I was looking at my desk back, I couldn't find it. Okay. Yeah, it says here to vote to approve the new driveway. So that's not what we're doing.
Public notice said you were doing tonight, by the way.
Well, it's certainly what we're considering.
Well, it's the only thing we can consider, because in the past, we have not considered trees that are not in the public way. The tree
Right.
warden asked
I did describe it.
the engineering department to mark it, and they found it to be not in the public way. That's what the tree warden would base his decision on. Right? If he was gonna cut it
Yeah.
down, if it was
Yeah.
sick.
Yep. All right. So we need to,
Well, we need to revise the decision perhaps to,
Condition it.
well, also, we're not approving the driveway per se. What we're approving is,
The consistency of the driveway with the scenic, road.
What does that mean?
We haven't finished crafting that
Yeah.
piece. That's what we're gonna.
Sounds,
Hey, we can't approve the driveway, so we can't say we approve the driveway.
it sounds.
What
I
what
think we
we
have to
would,
find that the driveway is within,
Within a public right of way.
no, we have to find that it
that does not
fitting,
violate
that
the,
it's appropriate for the public, for the scenic route,
The access for the driveway?
that it fits in,
Access.
that it
The
doesn't,
the
doesn't
access
negatively
for the
impact.
driveway?
Yeah.
Is within
the
the
access
That's
for,
what it is, it's
yeah.
the access.
That 5-foot
I think
swath
you
of
have to
land.
look at what your public notice said you were here to decide tonight. And if you're trying to change that, that could create problems.
Okay.
The access,
Thank
so
you.
the CPDC reviewed the proposed access.
Well, you review the driveway as it relates to the access.
but we didn't review the driveway at all.
Well, specifically, the driveway is before you is the access portion of that driveway.
Yes.
Yes.
But the driveway is before you.
All right, so how do we change this on the vote here to approve what?
The notice doesn't say that we're here to approve a driveway, we're here to consider construction of a second driveway.
Well, I
With
don't think it,
regards to the designated scenic road. If you wanna read the notice, I think we're within our purview to vote on this, because it doesn't say we're here to approve a new driveway, we're just here to consider the new driveway being constructed to accommodate accessory apartment in a designated scenic road.
I'm not suggesting that what you're doing is not proper, I just think that you have to make it consistent with the public notice.
all right, so I'm looking for some suggestions on how we modify this. Do you have something? Yeah.
If I may, that might help you possibly refine your wording. The pavement itself could be classified a driveway. The location of the driveway could be, is the curb cut. So you could technically, I would think, approve the pavement, which is the driveway, and not specify the actual location, which would be regulated by the curb cut permit, which the Board of Selectmen has jurisdiction over.
okay. Thank you. But I think what we might consider, if we can get the wording right, is to approve the construction activity in the scenic way of a new driveway, if such a driveway is approved.
Yep.
Such curb cut?
Such curb cut and driveway, yeah. Is approved by the, I guess, Board of Selectmen.
And the road commissioners.
So it has
What- what-
approved.
Why don't we just
the
say, but, yeah, you could say
Construction.
Activity.
by the,
In the
well, do we need to, do we even say, I mean, if there's other entities that need to approve it, just
Public
say,
right of way.
by the necessary authorities. Let's get selectmen out of it.
Away, subject to approval of curb cut.
Can you read that back to us, Jesse?
The CPDC has approved the construction activity in the public right-of-way, subject to approval of the curb cut by the Board of Selectmen.
I would say by the necessary boards
Are the necessary
needed for approval of,
Yeah.
boards, commissioners.
necessary boards needed for approval of the necessary boards needed for approval.
I don't think it's just the curb cut, it's all, any other appropriate relief that he's seeking before the zoning board of appeals.
Approving authorities.
Having the authority over that part.
By the appropriate.
Yes,
approving
that's what I was,
authorities.
that's why I was getting at,
Approving authorities.
Approving authorities.
right.
And the ZBA says that's not where it's gonna be.
So the CPDC has approved the construction activity in the public right-of-way, subject to approval of subject to approval of the curb cut by the necessary approving authorities.
Yep.
That's to replace finding number 1.
And that's in the intro, right, after the vote?
Right.
So you wanna fix it up there. To get rid of, to delete the new driveway.
Yep.
And I guess just pick up as shown on the plot plan. So what about this finding here? Should we delete this finding, this curb cut? Do we care, do we care? That's implying that we care.
Yeah, you should,
It's
I would
relevant.
delete that.
You
I would
want-
delete it.
Finding
Okay.
3.
Finding 3, I delete.
Yeah, no, 3 is irrelevant.
Because we don't care. We're implying that if we put in there, we imply that we care.
Well, if he was proposing a 24-foot wide cut, would you care?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, but I don't have jurisdiction over that, right?
the
No, that
finding,
would- that
finding
would be
3 is a
finding-
statement of
That would
fact.
be your scenic road impact.
I mean,
Fine.
There's no reason not to no reason to take it out, I think.
Okay.
I'm more interested in finding 1. What if we?
So that's what she just changed to the construction activity in the scenic way.
Okay,
So we're gonna replace finding 1, finding 2 will stay, and finding 3
I think we'll
keep as well.
keep it.
All right.
Any conditions?
I think the conditions are within,
Just the finding.
Yeah.
within the
Okay.
findings.
Right. Without additional conditions, right?
Without
Right.
additional conditions.
So I think that's all we can do in terms of our, what's in our jurisdiction.
I so move.
Jeff, Nick, are you guys thinking?
Yeah.
I mean, do we still need to add something specific related to our determination that the proposal does not impact the character of the scenic road?
Well, but it does.
It does.
It just doesn't, we don't have jurisdiction, no matter what this attorney says. I would rather not see the colonial, right? As my architectural professional opinion is that the Cape is a much more scenic house on that corner. But I don't have the right to tell him to do that.
Why we have appeals court.
Okay. Ready for the vote?
Well, was there a second?
We need a second.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? None. Abstaining. All right.
Unhappy, but done.
Okay.
Wait, Jeff, you seconded?
All right. Why don't we call the, let's get the folks to come in. I think we need a 2-minute break. Do you want to bring in the next, tell them the library folks?
Right.
Need just a quick 2-minute break.
Is that anything different than what we already have? Oh wait, is there one under there? There might be one under there. No, you weren't here. No. I think there's nothing much we could do.
So the next item on the agenda here is continuance of the public hearing for site plan approval for the library. And thank you all for your patience. I think the last time you hit us on a busy night as well, and you hit us again tonight, so we apologize, but we, the issue before us, before this one took a while. So, with that, we'll continue the public hearing. First I'll turn to Jean or Jesse to see if there's anything you want to introduce, or we turn right over to the applicant.
I think we'll go right to the applicant, given the hour and the crowd.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Chris Cordos with CBT Architects. We were here previously for a presentation, so we wanted to show you a revised presentation to update you on the site plan developments. Following the original CPDC meeting, we restudied the site plan in concert with town agencies and had several review meetings with the town departments in order to review some of the issues and make modifications to the site plan. That's what we'd like to present to you briefly this evening. Just as a refresher, this is the site survey, the original site plan for orientation. And again, I apologize that the writing is upside down. It's just to keep the orientation of the different drawings the same. This is the library as it stands today, Middlesex Avenue, School Street, and Deering Street. There's presently an entrance on the corner of Deering Street and Middlesex that brings you into the library, into the parking lot in the back, around to the east side, and back out at an exit near the corner of School Street and Middlesex Avenue. There's a road across the front that goes under the porte cochere, which is effectively not used. This site plan has approximately 49 spaces, one of which is very marginal. It's really 48. Next, Jean. Thank you. This is the previous site plan that we presented, which featured the existing building. It's the same orientation as the previous site plan. The existing building, the new addition, entry and exit in this proposal off of the corner of Deering Street and Middlesex along the west side of the building into a renovated parking lot around the lot and back out on a two-way road to the same intersection. And the focus of this was to maintain and develop the parkland that is to the north and to the west. Because of the location of the addition, it's very difficult to bring a road around this because of the steepness of the site. So this was the basis of the site plan before, and the comments that were generated. There was concern about having another way in and out of the parking lot, or in and out of the site, and to get some more parking. Next. This is the revised site plan that we've developed and submitted and are presenting this evening. I'll describe for you the differences. In terms of the building itself, the existing building and the addition, there is no change from the previous plan. The building design remains the same. It has a primary entrance off of the parking lot here on the south side, book drop in the same area. It has a side entrance into a lower level community room area off of the east. There's two fire egresses, one in the northwest and one in the northeast corner they're bringing out to this wall. The parking lot layout, first of all, the entrance to the site remains as it is today off of Deering Street near the intersection of Middlesex Avenue with a reconstructed entry to facilitate two access points. But it's basically one way in from here. Come into the rear parking lot, which is effectively the same as presented before with some minor modifications that I'll describe. This remains a two-way road. The difference is that we've introduced a road across the north side of the site that enters again on Deering Street. It's one way, brings you out to a reconstructed curb cut that is essentially where the present exit is. So the traffic pattern in and out of the site remains as it is today, with all entrance into the site off of Deering, all exit at this point onto Middlesex Avenue near School Street. So this is one-way traffic. The rear parking lot is effectively the same. The difference here is that we've made some minor modifications based on a fire truck criteria that the fire department provided for us that shifted the parking ever so slightly in this direction, a little bit to the west. And that was because the original fire truck pattern was developed using a standard computer model. The Reading Fire Department had its own criteria for a 27-foot inside radius, 45-foot outside radius. So we took those criteria, and we'll show you that diagram, and we overlaid it onto the site. And in order to not clip this corner right here, the parking shifted slightly, and we had to give up one space in order to accommodate those criteria. This introduction of this road does two things. It allows the police and fire department another way onto the site closer to the building, which is what they desired, and it adds 5 parking spaces right here. We introduce a little casual drop-off right here that would allow people coming out of the community room to get to this area of the building or to enter this area of the building. There's a challenge from this point to this point in terms of grading. We would have liked to have had this drop-off down in this zone, but in order, this site is so steep in this corner that in order to do that, we have to introduce some stepping here so it doesn't become a convenient drop-off from that standpoint. So we keep the drop-off area, this little plateau right here, and we manage to still get the 5 spaces in there. The dotted pathways you see are the accessible pathways. This is a little bit different in that previously you sort of walked parallel to with the road in order to get to this entry. Here you walk parallel to this new north road, and then you have to cross right here to get to the same pathway that brings you to an accessible entrance here. So this pathway is accessible once you leave the fire stair here, and once you get to this point, this is accessible. So if you park along here, this is an accessible path. This is an accessible path that brings you to the community room entrance right here. One of the comments on this plan was to increase, because of the town laws, to have a different ratio. The added parking spaces added 1 accessible space right here. Right here. We will recommend to the town that perhaps one of the parking spaces, either probably along School Street right here, maybe should be signed as an accessible space in order to facilitate the use of this pathway. One of the consequences of doing this is that this area all has to be regraded. Right now, we were trying to preserve it before, but in order to introduce the road, we regrade this in order to make this road manageable. It's a little bit steep right here, but we believe it is still manageable. We've adjusted the grades to make it work. We lose some landscaping along here that we will have to replace. There are a couple of small trees. There are some memorial trees that were going to be relocated anyway, but there were 3 larger trees that will be lost in this construction that will get replaced. We'll replant this area here, reconfigure an added tree. We relocated 1 tree from here over to here, added a few trees there, but we'll develop this so that we recover the trees that are lost. And that is effectively the difference between the previous site plan and the current. So the net parking result is we've lost 1 space here because of the fire truck criteria. We've gained 5 over here from what it was before. So it's 51 parking spaces, not counting 2 short-term spaces which remain right here next to the entry for people to do a short-term stop, drop off a boat to pick somebody up for a short-term delivery. Gene, if we could go to the next slide. This is the grading plan. This will refine some more, but you can see the change in the grading along the frontier and around the side here. This has to be cut in order to make this road less steep, in order to make it work. These grades get pushed forward. The area in the back remains essentially the same as it was before. Next, Gene. Thank you. This is the fire truck diagram using the radii that were presented by the fire department, the inside radius of 27, outside radius of 45, and this shows, you can see this fire truck path right here. You can see where this clips right here, which is why we took that parking space away so that it could drive over over that point in order to solve that matter. But we can make this turn, come around, go around, come back out again, make that whole pathway. The new path, this was done in comparison to the original site plan, but this all works to turn in and make, this is very straight right here, so it's not an issue. And those are effectively the changes that we're proposing on behalf of the proponent, the Reading Library.
Can you go back to the collector?
Excuse me, one thing I might add, we did respond in writing to the questions that were presented by comment by the applicants.
Anybody? Thoughts?
I think it's a good answer to the need.
Site plan indicates new parallel parking lanes on Middlesex, School, and Deering, but am I just not seeing them on this plan?
No,
or
they're not new, they exist.
Oh, they did exist?
These
Okay,
exist.
they're referred to as new
Parallel
here.
parking here, there's parallel parking here, there's parallel parking here.
Well,
Those are existing.
I think what they're talking about is striping
Oh, I see, okay.
the parking,
You can park there now.
certainly there, yeah.
Yep.
What's the grade of the, do you know the percent grade of that, the driveway in the front? Yeah.
I believe
Do
it
you-
seems to be around 7%. I don't have that in fingertips, but I think it's about 7%.
I think this is a great solution to some of the issues that we talked about last time. My gut reaction was that's a lot of pavement in the front, and it's a 20-foot wide drive along with the parking. And I guess I would throw this out more. I think this is for the question for the town engineer. I mean, especially with a one-way roadway. My experience is 18 is usually sufficient. Is there some specific condition here that drove it to be a little bit wider, or is there some reason why it's 20?
The Reading
Fire
Fire Department,
department?
they require a 20-foot fire lane. We agree, we thought it could be narrow, but they want 20 feet.
That's what we saw.
At 24 feet, it's a 2-lane road.
Yeah.
So, on the front, you can go into the library directly from the front, right?
No,
Someone,
the main entry remains, the main control point remains this entry.
so you can only exit the library.
You can exit, this is a policy and control issue for the library, and you can maybe ask Ruth if she'd like to speak to this, but these are fire exits right here.
Yeah.
They're not meant to be routine or daily exits because there are no book controls there. It's inconvenient for the staff to be able to supervise this, and I believe the intent is to have limited exiting depending on what programs are going on here from this point out to this area.
Right.
Because we can put book controls here and here, but these are fire stairs, so they're not convenient for book controls, and they can't, very difficult to supervise that type of transitory traffic going
Right.
through those.
So that'll eliminate most of what I was just about to say, but I wonder though with this is great, and this is I think what we want to see. The one comment I would have about this, and I don't know if you could also put the park on the other side, but my guess is that parents are going to drive up. If they're dropping off their kids, they're just going to use this little shortcut here, right? So they'll drive onto the property, drop off their kids. Now they won't be able to access the library directly, but so the kids will walk up and around the back. But I'm wondering with the parking there, if there's any kind of concerns or safety issues with dropping off kids with the parking there.
Well, the parking is, you're dropping off on the passenger side, so you're not asking them to cross the street.
No, but they're coming out right where parked cars are.
Yeah, but
Not a big deal, but
Can't people leave their children in front of the entrance?
Here?
Yeah.
Yes.
So they could just drive in, leave their child at the entrance, and then drive out again. They don't have to leave the child down by the corner of
Right.
Hearing
It's a
and
difference of
Middlesex.
what they can do and what they will do.
Well, yeah, that's true, but if, if
Yeah.
if they care about
right. Well,
the safety issue, then I guess they'll leave their kid close to the library if they choose.
or
Well,
they'll drop them off at the crosswalk.
I mean, ideally, we would like to have considered a cutoff right here, where you pull
Right.
off the lane, but the grading,
Right.
the grading just doesn't work. It's far too steep for that type of activity.
there's no way to flip the parking to the other side of that street, is there, and still deal with the fire department? Issues.
You could, but now
Put it
you're,
close.
now you're parking on the abnormal side of the street, and now you're forcing everybody to cross the road.
Yeah. So you have 6 and 1/2 dozen.
6 and 1/2 dozen
Right.
really, so we thought the best thing is to drop people off
Yeah, I
on
understand.
that side.
And you need the parking. You have to have those 5 parking spaces there. So, 'cause-
Do you?
well, there's not much parking here to start with.
It's good to have them.
Just plain devil's advocate.
Well,
I'm sure that 5 parking spaces, five parking spaces probably don't do a tremendous amount of difference between one and the other, and I think it's 28 feet of pavement in front of the building, plus the sidewalk, which I'm assuming is 5 feet. So that's a big stretch of pavement
Yeah.
in front of this building. So, the 8 feet, I mean, if we're stuck with 20-foot fire lane, if we can't do some other sort of creative way to soften the 20-foot fire lane, like we have in other places, then maybe a way to soften that would be to.
well, the 5 spaces is 10% of the total here, so it's not insignificant. So the other question is the other idea of putting the parking, which on Middlesex putting it as angle parking. That was something that had come up.
Historical objects to the 5 parking spaces.
You know,
So if you got rid of them, if you did get rid of the parking spaces, what would you do to the roadway? Would you move it south? Would you move the entire roadway south, or would you bring the sidewalk out to where the parking spaces are?
We'd probably move it south, because if the furthest, well, there's probably some middle ground, there are a couple of issues. Some middle ground where does the grading work best, but also I think we'd probably try to maybe get whether or not we want some territory between the walkway and the curb. We'd have to study where it falls best if we narrowed it or if we took off the parking. There's probably some balance there. Right now, because of its width, it's fairly pushing up against the porte cochere near the building, so we probably want to give a little relief right there. There's probably some middle ground, but it's hard without studying it to test it.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was
But it would
some
be-
specific thing that stuck out.
So the other idea which I just mentioned, that one of the suggestions was to consider the angle parking on Middlesex. You did not come back with that. Just curious if you could tell us a little bit what your thinking was on why not.
From a design standpoint, our firm doesn't believe that it's an appropriate answer. Our goal in this design has been to keep the quality of the neighborhood residential, to keep the quality of the building as a good residential neighbor to the houses nearby. And somehow turning the Middlesex Avenue into angle parking suddenly commercializes the street, number one. Number two, we think it does create more conflict than parallel parking in terms of people sort of pulling out while traffic is moving. Yes, it's done all the time, but it is a more conflicting approach against traffic, so this seemed a reasonable compromise. And that is really the development of a city street, whether the town would want to do that. There was a suggestion of a back-end angle parking, which
Yeah.
we've seen done before. I just have an anecdotal experience with it because I live in Haverhill, and I have angle parking, back-end angle parking. I've used it. It's a challenge for people. People back in very slowly. They're not used to backing in at an angle. They're okay backing in 90 degrees, but at an angle, they do it very slowly. and it leaves the car out on the road longer, and very few people get it in at the same angle. I can drive you down Dinky Boulevard in Haverhill, and I can show you 20 cars, none of which are parallel to each other.
Yeah, I mean,
But they manage it, they do it,
Yeah.
and it's a little awkward for people to do, especially at night. At night, I think people would find it a bit of a challenge.
And then the other comment I just want to make, or a question for you, is this the plan, as the fire, I'm sorry, fire chief, the police chief, taking a look at this and,
Yes, we had a meeting with the town agencies, the police chief, the fire chief, the town engineer, planning department, town manager. We talked about this in general, and it was
and you could say this safely addresses all their concerns.
It was, maybe Bob can speak to that.
Bob Lurlasher, town manager. The town engineer's here, he can speak for himself. The fire chief is thrilled with this answer. It gets his equipment in and out of the site, and it gives him 2 locations. The police chief's not quite as thrilled, but it is a 10% increase in parking, and, I use the same phrase Charlie did, 10%. Sounds a lot better than 5 spaces. Honestly, any more parking you can get is a good thing. That's one of the issues that was raised at the first hearing, is parking is an issue. 5 spaces may not seem a lot, but when the place is busy, you'll be glad you have the 5 spaces. Would the chief have preferred 20 spaces? Sure, but there's just no way to do it. So both chiefs are very happy with this answer.
The plan that we have in our packets is a little bit different than what you're showing up here in terms of the configuration of the entrance off of Deering Street, where you have an island. My question on that is that island raised, and if it is, was that plan reviewed by fire?
The meeting with the town agencies is very, very recent, and in the meantime, there's still a lot of engineering to be done, so we
Right.
continue to develop it. And we're basically showing this nominal divider right now in order to sort of regulate the traffic a little bit. We envision it being, if it's raised at all, it's gonna be change in texture, just to manage the movement of the traffic, but to allow a fire truck to just drive right over it. So we're not envisioning it being a raised curb where the plows are gonna take it out. Maybe just a change in texture in order, like a rumble strip, so that people know that I'm supposed to be to the right or the left in order to direct the traffic.
Great, thank you.
Excuse me, one thing, we do add light, this road has to be lit. So we have 4 fixtures, 1, 2, 3, 4, that will light this road. They're similar to the G1 fixtures in the parking lot, cutoff fixtures, facing inward towards the building, not out towards the street. The pedestrian lighting was not sufficient to cover the width of this road. So our lighting engineer looked at it and this is the proposal. We still have the pedestrian lighting that we had before, slight shifts in it because of the change in the plan, but the same pedestrian lighting along here and on the opposite side of the road, pole lights for the road itself.
George, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just in response to John's questions, during the staff meeting, we talked about signage or a possibility of different texture pavement or something. Myself and both chiefs knew there was something that would be installed there to regulate the traffic enforcement, but we, at the time, we didn't know what it was, because it still had to be designed.
Okay.
So we do something with the curb there.
Thank you.
Following last week's, or the previous meeting, an email came out after the fact, just questioning where are the bike racks. Can you just point out where they are, so we're all on the same page?
We have bike racks here next to the entry, right here.
Okay.
This is bike racks, right there, right near the entry. And we're looking at the possibility of adding some bike racks along the north wall of that walkway. Since there's parking there, we could enhance the bicycle racks.
And on that same question, can you point out the 2 spaces that are short-term parking?
There are 4 spaces from here to here. The first 2 are regular parking spaces. The next 2 are short-term spaces, which are regular-sized spaces, but they can be used for people dropping off books, for deliveries, And depending on the timing, for example, off hours or evening hours when there are meetings, the rules could be that those could be converted to regular parking when there are no deliveries going on.
And those are included in the 51?
No,
They're not.
those are in addition to the 15.
And the fire chief's aware of those spaces as well, and they're not, okay.
The plan, this is the plan that was shown. Minus the little enhancements, but effectively that parking lot.
Right, okay. Anybody else?
I got one last question. Why are we getting rid of the drive-through book drop? I've spoken to a lot of friends, and frankly, everyone's a little disappointed that that's going away. So I understand it's helpful for the librarians and the staff there, but it's a pretty nice convenience for those just dropping off, especially with small kids, to just throw them in and keep going.
It's very difficult for the staff to have to go out in the middle of winter and drag a heavy book bin up a road, we believe it should be in the building. It works very effectively we believe the way we have it laid out, it works very effectively. You can drop off, stop momentarily, drop, put your book in, but within the library, it allows you to take that book bin out under reasonable conditions, take it over to the elevator, either take it directly down to tech services or directly up to circulation, without really traversing the main parts of the library. It's a real challenge for the staff to have an outside book drop. And there's no way, I think one of the things we have to be aware of is that the main floor of this library is not on ground, it's half a level up. So there's no convenient spot, and it's very difficult to get near the building. To sort of pull up to something at the building and drop something in that's either gotta drop down a floor or get lifted up a floor. Because this entry is already lowered right here to this main level, it facilitates having the book drop here at a convenient spot near the entry where people coming in, they can drop their book off and continue on their way in. And we're already at the main level of the road, and the elevator is very convenient to it to be able to go up and down. But anywhere else in the layout, you'd have to be dropping the book down on the floor.
Could I suggest on that convenience that maybe those two short-term spots aren't the best place for those, perhaps? Because that means you need to parallel park, as opposed to maybe two perpendicular spaces. If it's not convenient, my guess is that there's a lot more overdue books. I mean, that's the downside of not making it convenient, so.
We're trying to avoid having people cross the road. We'd like them to pull off there.
Overdue books are a revenue source.
Are they?
Make it inconvenient.
No.
Not here.
Let's think about that.
All right,
Where do the books drop?
any other comments, or that's the public?
I think the extra roadway will be a drop-off, and I think that's good, because it'll alleviate some of the traffic pattern in the parking lot. So a quick drop-off from that
Yeah.
roadway, it's good. It'll give up some queuing time, too, for bigger events and get them off the road.
So, we didn't close the public hearing, right? So, if there are anybody from the public that wants to speak? If you could just state your name and for the ground rules, just if I could remind folks, so, just to make sure there's order, we just have everything, if you state your comments to the board, and then we can ask the appropriate people to respond, rather than having back and forth between the respondent and the public is helpful. So, go ahead.
Charlene Reynolds Santo, I'm the Brandon Historical Commission. And it's our opinion that the one-way traffic pattern across the front of the historic building is not desirable. Because of the fire department, that may have to happen. But we really object to the 5 parking spaces, all that space that it takes. We feel that that's really detrimental to the historic setting. The Secretary of the Interior Guidelines recommends designing new on-site parking, loading spaces, ramps, when required by new use, so that they are unobstructed as possible, and assure the preservation of historic relationship between the building or buildings and the landscape. We're also concerned about the loss of the trees. It sounds like the memorial trees will be relocated. We do not recommend placing parking facility directly adjacent to the historic building where automobiles may cause damage to the building or landscape features, or be intrusive to the building site. An additional concern is the introduction of what appears to be a new entry in the front, but I guess that's a fire exit. So now we have clarification on that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm Kathleen O'Leary from Middlesex Avenue. I just wanted to clarify, when you're a pedestrian, is that crosswalk over the one lane in front of the library, is that marked on the pavement as a pedestrian crosswalk? Will it be?
Are we talking about this right here?
Correct.
Yes, it will be marked.
Okay. And there was some talk about signage for people exiting with the point line, the visual point line. Will the signage, will there be signage or a stop line there?
Yeah, we will develop some signage for this corner, and indeed, talking with Ruth, we may want to consider a stop sign right there, since that's a crossing point.
Okay.
That a brief stop right here before you make that right turn might be appropriate.
Okay. And along the lines of pavement lines, will the parking be left alone as far as park along the curbside, or will it be painted on Middlesex during the school street?
Those are town roads. We've marked the spaces where we believe, how they fit. But I think
Okay.
it's town policy whether in a residential neighborhood you want to stripe the street or not.
Yeah.
Driving down Middlesex Avenue, there's no striping at all. We've illustrated where those parking spaces exist if we go 20 feet, 20 feet.
Mhm.
Whether or not the town wishes to stripe them is, I think, a matter for town policy, town engineer's office, the planning board.
I think we want to conserve the residential looks of this area.
Oh, that's not our, yes, I don't think that's not our jurisdiction, right? We're not the roads commissioner. That would be the selectmen. I believe.
And one other question.
Yes.
How many handicap spots will there be? One on
Currently,
site?
there are 3 on site.
3, okay.
There's one, 2 here, and 1 there.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Michael Hall, School Street in Reading. One thing that was brought up, there might be an accessible spot on School Street. And I was just wondering if the town would be taking care of the sidewalks or the walkways. In the past 10, 15 years, they've never been plowed or shoveled. So if that's gonna be an accessible spot, that would be an issue that would have to be addressed. And also, at the south side, no, the east side, looks like there's 3 or 4 parking spots up there, right up in there. The bushes that are in front there, are those designated any particular type of bushes or
We're going to
deciduous,
we've added those because we're aware of the screening issue for the headlights.
Yes.
So we'll select a species that's tall enough to screen the headlights without
But that would be
excessive.
evergreen, not a deciduous tree.
We'll work with our landscape architect to take care of it. That's why those are shown.
Also, on the Middlesex side, that driveway is gonna be after the sidewalks, 30 feet wide or something like that. Would that be a retaining wall put on there?
Right now, we've managed to grade it without retaining. Gene, can you pull this down here? If you, the other way? Yes, thank you. The grading in this area right here is a little difficult. And right now, we're trying to do it without retaining. If there was retaining, it would be very small, it would be relatively low, it wouldn't be a retaining wall, but it would be small step type of retaining, if at all, we're trying to avoid it.
It just seems like in front of the portico there, that there's really not enough room without a pretty steep grade going down there.
There is a pretty steep grade coming around this corner right here, this is fairly steep right here. This will be a slope.
No, actually on the Middlesex side.
On the Middlesex side, here.
Yes, up in there.
Yes, that will get, well, keep in mind, we're cutting as well as filling right here, so that the road is, the crown of this road is a little bit lower than what's there now. So we're trying to find the balance between lowering the road a little bit. In order to make this not too steep, we've sort of pushed the road down slightly. But that means regrading this area But right now, there's no routine. We just have to refine the grading.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Hi, Ray Hanlon, I live at 78 Middlesex Avenue, which is on the corner of Middlesex and Deering. How far out is from the building out to that walkway? How many feet is that? From the corner on the left, the front left, right there, how many feet out to that, to the walkway?
To the
That
walkway.
that walkway right there that the pedestrians are gonna be crossing, roughly, yeah, the crosswalk.
Excuse me while I look at, I need some scale reference here.
The reason why I ask that is because with traffic coming out, I'd be concerned about it being a blind corner. I mean, I see that it's out further, so they won't be taking that turn. I'm just concerned about pedestrian safety with crossing that crosswalk with someone coming out at the same time.
It's about
It's on the order of 25 feet.
Yeah.
20,
Is it
25 feet.
All right. The other thing too is, and this is just trying to think realistically here. If someone's coming out, what's to keep them from looking left, seeing that no one's coming, and instead of having to shoot all the way across and then come back to head towards High Street, to shoot out that entrance?
That's sort of
To do that now.
typical of
My
any,
job
any,
to watch.
any traffic situation where nobody's looking.
I mean, I don't know if like
I
I'm
wish I
seeing
could
where the
answer that,
island
I
is.
can't.
I'm seeing where that
Uh-huh.
island type thing is, and
Yeah.
you know, if it's gonna be inconvenient for someone to make that turn that way because of it, I don't, just kinda throwing that out there.
Mhm.
But,
It's a
you know,
policing matter.
one other, and just one last point is, the front of that library, especially in the summertime, you have the concert out there, you've got, you know, what's the other event we have out there? The Garden Club has their event out there in the front. I mean, it's part of the library is things that happen in the front, you know, and it's just a beautiful space, and now it's not gonna be there, you know? It's just too bad there isn't some other answer to this exit situation. You know, it's,
I think the other alternative is to go around the building, and that creates a whole other series of issues that are
you know,
that are less desirable.
it's, you know, the other point I wanted to make was it's too bad we actually have to even put an addition on this building. If we didn't, of course, we'd be able to use the roads that we're doing right now. But, you know, I think what the state granted, what they're giving at $5 million, it's really a drop in the bucket compared to what the rest of the town's putting in. And to renovate the building as it is.
I understand that, but that ship has sailed, and that's not what we're here, that's not what we're here for. So I'm gonna see, is there anybody, any other public comments? Yep.
I'm concerned about the lighting on Middleton facing into the library. There's people on, especially in homes on School Street on the Middlesex, close to Middlesex. Are those lights gonna be timed? Or are they on all the time?
So just, if you don't mind, just telling us who you are and where you.
Oh, Steve O'Regan, School Street.
Great, thank you. And you wanna address that?
Which location?
These lights, on the
These
new,
lights?
yeah, these lights, actually, all the lights.
All the lights, the photometric plan shows that the basic, that the light levels cut off essentially along the perimeter of the site. So they're shielded fixtures so that the light, so this light pole, for example, here is not gonna be lighting that direction, it's only gonna be lighting this direction. So all the light is inward towards the site. And
Still, but if it's angled in on this side here, these homes on the School Street here are gonna be lit up, or at least,
no.
it may not be traveling to the sidewalk, but they're gonna be looking at lights now. And my question is, are those lights on 24 hours?
Not 24 hours, they'll be on an astronomical clock that when daylight is gone, they will turn on automatic.
Okay, so they're on even after the library closes?
Yes. Although we're looking into the possibility of having automatic dimming, sort of say after
Automatic
midnight, if it's
dimming?
possible to do it with these fixtures. We're looking at that potential.
And they have to be on when the school is, when the library is not, open?
It's a town policy matter and a policing matter.
So I believe in the back of the school, the library, is, it's just one light now on the side of the building at night.
So Gene, will you be able to get more into detail on the lighting issues here, or, I mean, 'cause we have certain policies that, so that those things don't. so
Probably
they're not-
something the board should talk about if you wanna get into, you know,
Right,
the lighting being extinguished at the close of business.
right, okay. I think I saw a couple of hands. Yes.
Everett Blodgett, 99 Prescott Street. Just want to put on record that personally I'm against so much pavement. It's just huge. It's such a beautiful site, such a beautiful lawn. It's just a big loss now and down the road. We've got to force the issue of people walking and knowing that that's a great neighborhood. Jen and I have driven up in there continuously the last few weeks to look at the amount of parking that's available. It invites people into the neighborhood gently, not really aggressively. I'm just wondering, and I'm gonna throw out a totally strange idea. If Deering Street were made one way, could there be a possibility that that in and out road next to the library on the Deering Street side would access directly onto Middlesex Ave, creating some parking spaces? Maybe you'd lose some of the front, but not, this is almost gross when you look at it. I know that the fire department has a necessity to want to be in certain places. That would still, you may be able to widen it to the point that you could have a truck there. They might have to back out, not drive around the building. But if we made Deering Street, that's a terrible corner to take coming up Deering Street now into the library. Now, it's still going to be there. Taking a left out of there is tough. I just think if we went directly out onto Middlesex Ave, you'd have one entrance coming out onto that street and one coming into the library and one coming into Deering Street. It seems like it would control the sharp corners. It'd be more like a wide driveway instead of a terrible set of corners.
Maybe you could help us, we're having a little trouble understanding what you're.
Well, on your Deering Street side, make it one-way entrance in from Middlesex.
Yeah.
Okay?
Southbound.
Well,
Yeah.
entering from Middlesex or entering from Deering Street?
No,
No.
make Deering, first off,
Make Deering Street one way.
One way southbound.
Which way?
Southbound.
Okay.
Southbound. Okay?
So this way,
Right-
okay?
No, coming
From,
from top to bottom, it would come down in.
You wanna start here and go this way?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That's southbound.
And then take your two streets, your two-section driveway next to the building,
This one,
that's right, and put it right out to Middlesex Ave.
straight out here.
Right out to Middlesex Ave. Widen it, put a couple of parking spaces down there, you know, work in that corner of the building. I just don't know if it would work, but it seems to eliminate some other problems with the situation of coming, I guess it's north on Deering Street, cutting in. In addition to that, I live in a historic building, I camp on that side. Putting all that traffic up there, putting parking up there, that porte cochere. I don't know how many times you've seen cars drive through buildings in the last 3 weeks on the news, but that's just putting a bullseye out there to get hit. I just think that the left side could go right out onto Middlesex Ave and have an in and out. Have I explained it correctly? And personally, the 5 parking spaces, to me, is really insignificant. The future says we've got to get people to walk. You know,
be walking from there.
they'll be walking just as far as if they parked in the street someplace. And the percentage of the big room down there, when you have 150 to 200 people, you know, let them, they're gonna be on the street anyway, so it doesn't happen that often. I realize there's some give and take here, but it's just so much pavement, just huge. And the loss of activities at the library on that lawn, the scenic ability to see that building. I'm just offering it as an idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David Z. 3 Pearl Street. Was there consideration of adding an exit to the east out onto right onto School Street there, you know, just right out of the parking lot, so whatever the entrance is, exit right down that hill.
Yeah, I think you did look at that. I think, yeah,
Right.
It's extremely steep. It's on the order of 14%, 13%. And it basically, you'd be sliding into the abutter's driveway in the winter. It's very, very steep. There's a 14-foot drop from there, roughly 14 feet from that point to the street.
yeah, I'm sure.
It's very, very steep. Diagrammatically, I understand that in plan, it looks like why not go straight up. But the problem is that it's the elevation change. The parking lot is quite high relative to that. It's the same problem with going around the east of the building, is that you have to fill all this land into a very high retaining wall to really support it.
It's just, it strikes me that the whole round front thing just seemed really overkill. The problem. Maybe that's any solution.
So there's a sign-in sheet going around, if people could, rather than have everybody go to the back of the, stand a long line there, it's moving around, so if you guys just make sure you sign it before you leave today. Yes?
I'd also add the point that that's a 7% drop. I think Vermont starts to mark their hills when they're at 6% drop as a steep grade. And it's probably about 5% coming out of the present outside. If you're gonna be moving up toward the center of the building, it's gonna have to be more. 7% grade is a pretty steep grade coming off the front of that building. Yeah.
Well, there is pavement today from the Deering Street entrance through the Porte Cochere all the way to Middlesex Avenue on the other side. I mean, what's being proposed is basically pulling that pavement, or pulling that out, replacing it.
Times three.
Times three.
Times three.
I understand it's being widened, but it's also pulling it away from the historic structure and to a certain extent dropping it below the sight line of the building.
And it's currently not used.
I understand that.
Other comments? Yes.
Yes, I'm Roberta Sullivan, 76 Minot Street, and I went to school there. I would like to know the rationale, and I really didn't notice this before, and I looked at these plans through the historical commission. Everybody has to leave this way. Why? Why can't they come in and go out, in and out, and this is only emergency, and build it as an emergency? I mean, pray to God, we don't have a lot of fires there, and a lot of need for fire trucks. Why are you directing everybody to leave this out this way? And this great big entrance here, and the parking, and we want people parking here, they're gonna have to walk clear around this whole building to get into the building. For books and children and whatever you're doing, 5 spaces is, it's like, they're not necessary. You could probably bring this down to 18 feet, remove those parking spaces, but I would like the answer to why this rationale of having everybody go out the one exit.
There was a lot of concern that was expressed at our last meeting by the police chief, engineering, and his board about, and others, about having that entrance be, the safety of that entrance being two-way in its immediate configuration with Middlesex and Deering Street. And so that's how this plan evolved. George, I think in other situations in town, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but there have been cases where roadways, where the width of the roadway, the fire lane needed for the was accommodated, maybe not by full depth regular pavement, but maybe something else to provide a little the width that they wanted, but maybe not have it be 100% pavement. Is there any, would you see any opportunities to do something like that here to minimize that visual impact of all the pavement that's being proposed in front?
I believe it's possible. I mean, I think in any of those cases, they were as approved by the chief. I know that he's always indicating that on his apparatus. I believe his outriggers themselves extends, it needs a 16-foot width. So, I mean, he'd be very concerned on, the stability of what the material would be, but I think that, the possibility may exist to do something like that, but we'd have to discuss that with the chief to see what he'd allow.
We have asked our civil engineer about a pervious type of pavement system, and the concern there was that it wouldn't, especially in wet weather, would not support the weight of the truck. And that it'd be very difficult to plow, it might get torn up, and the truck would sink.
Not surprising.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the plan is to have the building fully sprinklered?
Yes.
Any other comments? Okay. Oh, yes.
Hi, my name's Ileana Alvarado, Branch Street. I just have a question on the wall that's along Ealing Street. Is the existing wall going to remain, or will it be replaced?
We anticipate it will remain, and we're going to repair it as best we can.
Can you describe a little bit about the plan of repair?
There are a series of cracks. There are a couple of sections that just need to be repoured, or at least pieces of it repoured. And then there's a series of linear cracks which would have to be opened up and repaired with a cement basis. The stairway there's a little stairway that's going to get relocated, taken out, filled and rebuilt and moved northward to a better position on the site.
So then
And there's a fence on top that will be replaced.
okay. So then the question I have is, have the construction roads that will be on that wall during the entire construction period, concrete trucks, steel trucks, will be on that wall? And is the cost that we're planning for to repair cracks really considered at this point in our cost estimate? There will be, if the trucks are allowed to get close to that edge of that wall, there might be some issues.
It's a good point. We'll certainly look at the influence of that on the wall.
I have a couple of other questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
One of the comments that I've been hearing tonight is the site is very steep, the site is steep, the site is steep. And I'm curious if the cost estimate considers a site that's not flat. So a lot of construction costs are based on a nice flat site, easy access. And when I hear about all the site grades, the contractor's not going to be able to place all of the staging equipment like you normally would on a flat site. And I'm concerned of premium costs associated with our site restrictions being considered in the cost estimate.
It's a valid question. I'm not sure this is necessarily the forum for that. So if you want to maybe take that up later.
Email or something.
Yeah. Other
My
questions?
other question would be similar to that. So
Okay.
Is it, so there is, this is my first time with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they're good questions, but we're trying to, it's really on the site plan, and cost issues are not necessarily 100% related to that. So. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Gene or Jesse, you've had some memos here. Have your
Yes.
things at this point all been addressed, or do you have additional things?
There were some comments from the public that we included. These came in as recently as today. There is a memo from the fire chief on page 63 of the desk packet. The town engineer's memo is on page 62. The safety officer's memo is on 61. And there is a public comment, I think at the end of all of that, on page 64.
We have a memo that's on page 59, Steph, planning staff.
Okay. Yeah, so this memo, are the things you wanna, let's see here, the things you wanna ask the applicant now, or do you wanna put these in the first one can go in the decision.
We made the point earlier about the addition having, an impact from a lighting standpoint. The interior
Yeah.
lighting of that glass addition is gonna make an impact. And we were told that there are gonna be some blinds that would be used, window treatments,
Okay.
to control the impact of that, strong light into that residential neighborhood. So we just wanna understand how that would work, and if there's a schedule for when those blinds would be drawn to reduce the impact.
Are you able to address those at this point, or is that detail?
We've designed in the shading, it'd be a policy decision of the library how to actually operate those blinds.
Yeah, that's
And we also have landscaping, keep in mind that there's landscaping along this side of the site that's gonna help mitigate that light as well.
Okay.
It's not a bare hillside.
If I remember, it's tinted glass in much of it?
I'm sorry?
Is it tinted glass or is it clear glass?
No, it's not.
Okay.
There is a sunscreen element that goes over part of the glass.
Okay.
Do you have another comment?
Yes, we was talking about the screening there, those are deciduous trees, so 6 months out of the year, it's gonna be wide
Appreciate
open.
that, yeah.
Oh, that's an issue, definitely an issue with that.
But that's what the intent of the shading system is.
So, but the trees you're talking about in the parking lot though, are those deciduous or are those
In
evergreens?
the parking lot, those are deciduous. There are no trees in the parking lot now.
No,
He
not,
was
I mean,
referring to
right, I know
what-
it's referring to, but I wanna make sure which ones we were talking about, so.
You took down the site plan. There are,
I meant screening the park, screening the park, not in the parking lot.
the existing trees here, memorial trees to be replanted that will grow, and the new planting here, here, and here. We can look at what those species are, but this is an existing tree that we're not proposing to
Right,
take down.
right.
It's a very large maple.
Right, okay,
At least for part of it, we'll offer some screening.
right, okay.
Could you put that picture back that had the front view kind of? To show the roadway showing all that? Yeah.
I guess
Okay.
I'll throw out a comment there. I would still advocate for removal of those 5 parking spaces, and the consideration of, angle parking on Middlesex. I think that angle parking, front end, not reversed angle parking, in the front would certainly mitigate for those five spots. And on the, have the added benefit of, slowing down traffic some on Middlesex. I know in the last meeting that we had, there were, there are a number of folks that expressed that, that people, and I've experienced it, people do speed down Middlesex. It's a wide road. It was, right, there used to be a trolley that ran down Middlesex, so do I have that correct? I think that's, my understanding is that's why Middlesex Ave is so wide, is because it was a trolley line at one time. And so it can accommodate that extra, that need, and that's probably why people speed, down there, is because it's pretty wide and straight. I think that would be a way to provide a little bit more, as we've heard, park-like setting, removing some of that parking in the front, but still, going back to the comment by the town manager about the need for parking. advocate that, but not insist.
Some of the residents were asking whether they could get a stop sign at Deering, and I think the police chief said he probably would rise to the criteria for requiring a stop sign. Would the angled in parking add enough criteria to make it eligible for a stop sign?
I thought he said it could qualify for not a four-way, but a two-way stop sign.
I mean, if you stop them right before we get to the angled parking, it does a bunch of things, right? It slows down potential pedestrian crossing.
Maybe a two-way.
You already have a two-way there.
There is one there?
Is there a two-way there? Oh.
The Deering.
Stopping.
Yeah.
From
I
Deering.
like the idea of four-way.
I wanted on Middlesex.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking on Middlesex, not on Deering.
Right,
Oh,
yeah, on Middlesex. I don't know the answer to your question.
It doesn't qualify for, that's what they said.
But angled parking now adds an element. I'm wondering if it does.
Okay.
And I hate it.
Slow it down, the whole area down a
Right.
little bit.
Gene, you had a couple other things in here about parking, striping the parking?
Yes.
You were concerned that,
Well, question. I
It was
guess.
unclear.
will the pavement be striped according to the revised site plan?
Oh, yes, that,
Yeah.
we wanted to verify.
So just to verify, this is what they're gonna actually do, or that they're gonna stripe it as?
Well, basically Middlesex Avenue is the Board of Selectmen, right, is the highway.
Well, I
Well,
guess
that's not
the
what she's
question
asking.
is part of the project going to add pavement markings to Middlesex and, well, all the locations that you see here, or is the town gonna have to ante up and, do that?
Again, based on residents' comment, our intent is to stripe the parking lot as a parking lot for the items on site. We had no intention of striping necessarily the surrounding streets. That's a town street, town matter. And again, personally, I don't know that we would advocate it for the simple reason that it's not, the rest of Middlesex Street is not striped. And it sort of takes away from the residential quality thing. That again is a town matter.
So that was your question, Gene, on
We have
Middlesex.
a lined crosswalk that we use on.
I'm sorry?
We do have a lined crosswalk.
Crosswalk is something different, crosswalk, yes. I did want to offer one comment on the angle parking, if I may. If you angle parking or 90-degree parking, then we have to cut into the site and build a retaining wall.
The road is very wide. You could do bump outs. You could have Howard Stein Hudson develop a really nice configuration where you have some bump outs. You have angle parking, not cut into the road. It would actually provide a nice traffic calming measure along Middlesex. Again, I'm throwing it out there because that's something that could be done later on. It's pavement markings. I'm gonna guess that that's an issue that we as a town are gonna come back to, parking in this area after this is all built. I'm putting it out now because I think a solution like that is gonna happen and make those 5 spaces probably less critical, because doing angle parking, you get those plus, I think, a number more, although I didn't do the calcs. So, I'm not putting that on you, but I'm just saying that I think that's probably a better solution than keeping the 5 spaces in front of the building.
Yeah, Steve Oregon again. Those 5 spaces, are they required? In the front of the 5 spaces you wanna add in the front of the building?
I think, in terms of required, big picture,
For this site.
this is the town-owned property, so, it's not necessarily that they have to do all these things. Having said that, we're making recommendations, and if we decide to recommend that they do 5 spaces, we would hope that they would do that. So it's not necessarily required in that regard,
It's
but.
not a requirement, and rather than having those 5 cars up high on the hill where people are gonna be looking at them from across the street on both sides, then why put them there at all? Why have angle parking on Middlesex? What's the point? The 5
Yeah.
spaces that, doesn't really seem to be a problem now.
I think the issue is that there is general concern about parking on the site expressed by different people, including the police chief. This is in response to that. that comment, if we decide to recommend or not recommend that they do that, we would expect that they would do that, but again, they don't have to take all of our recommendations. So,
Can you explain what the concern is?
the concern is there's not enough parking, that's a safety issue, that there's not enough parking.
On Daring, on Middlesex, on School, in the adjoining streets, down Middlesex.
You're adding 150 capacity room adjacent to the building and not adding any additional parking, essentially. So that's what the general concern is. Yes?
I just don't want to minimize the need or maybe the concern we have in that neighborhood walking to the library, especially with kids, for striping on the property of the corner, let alone the street, but the striping across.
Crosswalk.
Not the
Striping the
crosswalks when you
crosswalk.
come up the sidewalk to approach the library in that front area, on the property of the library.
Oh, on the property, yes, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the discussion about striping was the striping off the library property on the street, correct? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Oh, is there another comment? Okay,
I just
yep.
wondering, the Daniels house, the employees, Monday through Friday, they take up 13 spots on Middlesex Ave right in front of the library, every day. 13 spots are taken by the employees up there. And I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that. I mean, it's gonna be taking up parking spots that the library could be using. No, this is this is in the morning when they first show up for work, that 7:30 shift. 13.
So, I mean, again, now we're starting to get into sort of town policies about parking, right? So if that's an issue that, that the Board of Selectmen or something needs to address in terms of how they deal with parking, that would be for them, that would not be for us here. And again, that's showing that there is a lot of pressure on the parking here, so. Anything else? Okay. So, are we ready to close the public hearing and work on the decision? Yeah?
Move that we close the public hearing for the Reading Public Library Plan at
Before.
64
there's an
Middlesex
address.
Avenue. 64 Middlesex Avenue.
64 Middlesex Avenue.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the decision. So have the folks from the library had a chance to look at the decision? Yes.
Just came today, I've not read it. So not in detail, I mean, not line by line.
Okay. So do we want, how do we wanna do this? Do we wanna give them a chance to look at it? So what's the timing here? I mean, should we do this now? They could look at it, refine it. I mean,
Yeah, they had an earlier draft, so this is just a revised site
Okay.
plan, so, not really.
So the earlier draft you've had a chance to look at?
Except for
Last month.
Well, you can.
So this decision was revised to update the number of lights, update some of the conditions. Not much has changed from the previous variation.
I'm just wondering if we should deal with the actual wording of the decision at the next meeting, if that's easier.
We can do that one.
Give you a chance to actually look at it, decide.
Jesse, the decision is based on this latest plan.
It was actually based on what they had submitted in your packets.
Right.
This,
So we haven't
we
seen
just
that
saw
one.
it tonight,
Yeah.
so.
I think that just changed the entrance mostly,
Yes.
right?
So they shifted the parking over?
Shifted.
Yeah, shift.
It's
Plan C
more
is a
detailed.
refinement of what's submitted, but the concept is the same.
Yeah.
In general, I assume the library and the committee are in favor of this plan. If they're not, they should let us know.
Yeah.
Let me say that the chairman of the building committee, we, after the last meeting, which we presented the single exit preserving the 2 park sites. Heartbreaking to, but we have to take in all the concerns. There was concern about the traffic flow, all on Deering, concern about the parking density on the lot, and concern about the double access for the safety vehicles. So, we worked hard, kudos to the architects, project, and the manager and the town folks to come up with this alternative. This one has some cons too, obviously, but based on the input from everyone, based on the requirements from the town about safety and parking, which in our view are non-negotiable, this is a better solution. This meets those compared to the last one. So, again, with a heavy heart to put more pavement across the front rather than what we proposed, this clearly meets those compromises. So the building committee did unanimously endorse this plan as the best of the worst choices here. And, everything that's been said tonight has been heavily debated and weighed heavily, but, we even the parking, we've talked about the angled parking. I think, bear in mind that there's, 8 or 10 spots now. If you angle it, you're gonna pick up like a net 5, I think. Something like 5 or 7.
It might be a little less now with the curved road.
Yeah, so, so we can, if we did the angle, you basically net the same parking. Now, the parking density is more important to the town safety officials than the library building committee. But it's important enough that, we're trying to accommodate it in this plan.
Right.
So, so we did endorse this plan based on this hard realities.
So I think if I could take the pulse of the board, I think where we generally are, and correct me if I'm wrong, we think we generally like this plan. I think right now we'd just be refining the details of it and getting a final decision on how we wanna word the 5 parking spaces in the front, I think. If that's, did I summarize that adequately, Dave?
Well, for all of the pluses and minuses, my tendency would be to approve it as presented. You can change things, back and forth approximately forever. It's not perfect. I think it's not as bad as people fear. And I think we need to get it moving.
Yes. What's your next steps? What's your timeline for?
Trying to get this out to bid at the beginning of August.
Okay. So I think, from my perspective, the only thing we'd be thinking about is if, just like anybody else, if they were subject to site plan review, we'd be dealing with some of these small things related to some of the neighbors' concerns about the lighting and the landscaping thing so that the neighbors' concerns are addressed. I think that's the only thing we'd be fussing around with the language, and that's not gonna impact, their ability to bid it, so.
From the draft that we have before us, I'm not sure that there's any particular change required.
I just wanna give them the opportunity too to comment on it, but if,
Yeah, I guess I'm not super comfortable the fact that, there is a new plan, new lighting, a little bit different, not big changes, but that, that we have a site plan decision here that doesn't necessarily match the plan that, we would be approving.
In what sense?
It's different.
Well,
We looked at we looked at the plan that was submitted, that's what this reflects. And we have a new plan here in front of us. Minor things, I mean, I don't think that there's anything big, but I think that we need to make sure that the phrasing and everything in here is correct, and like you said, a chance for everyone to
yeah,
review and be comfortable.
and I don't think it impacts them, and because I think we're telling them that we generally like this, and this looks good. And I don't think it's not gonna slow down your bidding of the work, so.
Well, I don't know that, but
The engineer will be ongoing and drainage
Yeah.
refinement, but conceptually, this is.
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
plan.
yeah.
Conceptually, that, you
Yeah.
should, conceptually, I think we're telling you to go with that. Unless I'm overstating my word.
The only potential changes are the 5 parking spots in front and the width of that roadway, neither one of which are up to us.
Right.
They recommend that they don't put them in and they reduce the roadway.
If I were, I'm gonna interrupt you for a second, if I were to write this right now, I'd wanna put some language in here that they work with the town engineer to see if there's a way to, reduce the width of the pavement, yeah. We're not gonna come up with that solution, they're not gonna come up with that solution between now and in 2 weeks from now, but I'd wanna have some good language in there to give enough flexibility to, that if they can figure out a way, cause I think it's at least in the library's interest to do that, right, I mean, and I think if the town we can all figure out a way to do that, then we should do that and not hang them up on that, right, I mean, that's sort of what you were, before I interrupted you.
Yeah.
So I think it's getting that kind of stuff in here.
Yeah, okay.
That
I think it's important for us to anticipate what you're gonna recommend, the challenges, those 5 spots, because we wanna use the next 2 weeks to final, really work up the plans, work with the town folks to decide, whereas in the end, it's really the town that's gonna decide, Bob and the safety officials. We'll do it either way.
Yeah.
Right, so we'll work with them and see, and come up with the options, and then, but I guess that working group's gonna pop out a solution. And it sounds like if we move the bid documents along in that direction, and then we'll have to come up with a decision on the working group, that's pretty much what you're gonna ask, do I understand that correctly?
Yes, I think that's right. George?
Mr. Chairman, Chief Burns is in this week. I will get together with him this week and Chief Cormier, and we'll discuss the pavement width and see if there's any way that it can be reduced somewhat, and let you know well
Great.
before you meet.
Super, thank you.
well, what we might be able to do is in fact keep the pavement width, the 20-foot fire lane, and make what are now shown as the parking areas, the pervious standing only, basically no parking, place for somebody to drop off, rather than have it as a fully paved parking area. I mean, that would basically reduce the front path to the 20-foot minimum.
I don't know what you're saying. You're saying remove just stripes and just have the hardscape?
No, remove the hardscape for the parking lot, for the parking spaces. And maybe put the pervious pavers there for short-term
Oh,
passenger vehicles.
I think that dovetails right back into what George is gonna try to talk about.
Right.
So that dovetails into part of that whole conversation, so, okay.
But I think the issue that hasn't been sort of fully vetted out is those 5 parking spaces. The width being sort of a different issue, but I understand that the historic commission has issues with the 5 parking spaces right in front, and that's on the other side, there's a feeling expressed by the town manager, I think, and others, that we need to try and get as much parking on the site as possible. And so I think your question was, what's this board's feeling on those 5 parking spaces?
We'd be
Right.
happier if they weren't there, is I think is what I've been hearing.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to be there unless something different happens on Middlesex. That's my opinion.
One point that we discussed in various meetings had to do with the idea of shared parking, which is something I know that this board
Mhm.
has talked a lot about. It's in our zoning bylaw, so that when there are larger events, you know, could there be some opportunities for shared parking off-site or,
Your driveway?
you know,
$20 a car.
For a price, I think it's possible, right?
Done.
How about 12?
Sorry.
the town owns, has a license for about 43 parking spaces on Vine Street, for example. And I think it's about 4 blocks from the library. We also have a van that we run every day, out of the senior center. So something where, you know, we could come up with some creative solutions for managing the parking, especially, as I say, when there are big events, that would be different than trying to squeeze more parking onto the site.
Okay.
Just an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
we need to keep the ball rolling.
yes. Well, so we're back to, are we gonna do this decision tonight or just move it off to the next meeting so that they have time to look at it and we have time, you said you wanted to look at a new revised site plan. So I think that that's where we're headed. I don't think that's an impediment because all we're saying is that the only thing that I think is still in play is what to do with these 5 spaces, and I don't think that materially impacts how you bid the job, so. All right? So do we need to make a motion to move it to that? Or we just say we'll take the decision up next week, give them a chance to look at it?
I don't know if you wanna take a vote to finalize the decision at the next meeting?
That's, yeah.
Alright.
Did you have another?
Close the public
We
hearing.
didn't close the public hearing yet.
Yeah.
Do we vote on that?
I think we did.
When?
Did we close the public hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you were gonna, I was waiting for you. You guys look like you were conferencing. I didn't wanna do anything without.
It was, I'm trying to make sure that the architects, I mean, it doesn't sound like we necessarily proceed in the next 2 weeks until we have this decision, unless we meet tomorrow and as a project decide on the parking. But
I think the only variable we're talking about is whether or not to remove those 5 spaces. And I'm not sure that really materially impacts your plan.
So it impacts grading and it impacts top of curbs, bottom of curbs,
You have
where
a,
the stuff is
you have an
going,
$18 million
all-
project here
all
that
the
you have
way up,
to
right,
build.
that needs to get squared away in the next month.
Okay, so the
Literally
next,
every detail.
our next meeting is in 2 weeks, right?
The public hearing's closed, but just to be very clear, the 5 spaces are part of the things the chiefs agreed with, period, end of story. It may not seem like a lot of spaces to you, but it's the best we can get.
July 14th is our next meeting.
And we did discuss all these alternative shared parking and everything else, and that's what made only 5 more acceptable, just to be clear.
Okay.
Okay.
Move that the CPDC approve the site plan review decision for the Reading Public Library at 94 Middlesex Avenue.
There's some typos and edits in here, so if you wanna go through those, or do you?
We can go through those. if, you know,
So
take
I
time.
thought what we're voting here on is to approve it, but to work on the wording of this decision so that the neighbors' concerns about lighting and bushes and those little details are memorialized here, just like we do for every other site plan decision. And give the applicant the time to look at it and give them comments, so that we're not just forcing it on them. So if they're gonna live with this, then they would, like we do with every other applicant, they can comment on it. But if not, then you would wanna just look at have it go with a new site plan.
I mean, we can roll up our sleeves and work this through, but
Alright.
it's gonna be another, it's
I know, that's
another
what's sort of
long one.
like, that's what I was, that's where I
That's
was
fine
going
with
with
me.
this, but.
Let's do
Really,
it.
look, the, everything after the findings is boilerplate. Right?
What's that?
Everything after the findings is just boilerplate. It's only the 13 findings that need to be worked on.
Fine, we'll do it.
Let's do it.
And it's all sort of generic language, like lighting, right? It tells you how many lights are there and that they'll be shielded.
Is that,
Should say
is
that.
that correct, based on this plan? Or, I mean, I haven't had a chance to review this plan, so, we have 10 pole lights?
Yes, 10.
8 pathway lights?
Yep.
And you're maintaining the 3 recessed for the canopy, correct?
Can you determinations on the building?
Provide for additional drop-off area and also provide 5, right? Or is it existing 749,
They're now showing,
vertical resort until there's 51
this,
spaces, and now they have there's
has a
3 handicap spaces with
space.
this?
Yes.
But I thought he said they're getting rid of it because of the turning radius.
No, they're, look, up there, they're turning, they're moving this like this,
So it's
right?
3
And then
handicap
this is a handicap space. That can't be a handicap space because there's no accessible path.
Those trees aren't there anymore, right? The trees in the middle of the parking lot are gone?
These trees?
Yeah.
No, they're still there.
We're gonna move the lights so that they're not in the consistent part of the tree.
Well, we'll make a final adjustment for that based on the species.
So is there an island there
Yes.
as well? Okay, so how does that handicap spot even comply?
Yeah, that handicap spot, I don't think can be there. Cause there's no accessible path from there. There's also the width of the, what do you call that, the landing area, the access area, it isn't wide enough.
Yeah, no, I know it needs to be there. I know we need that, aisle space next to it. so
We were
it's
trying
gonna
not to lose another space because of the fire department's criteria, it cut into the space. And then it came up that the town safety officer wanted another accessible parking space. Putting it anywhere else, we lost the space. Unless we use one of
Put it
these,
there, yeah.
we possibly could use one of those.
Well, why would we lose anything if we're just doing that?
We've already lost the one on the end because of the turning, because of the fire
Yeah,
trucks.
we can look at putting it here.
If you put it there, you don't lose any space, right?
No, you still lose it. The one on the end, he's saying, you still lose
The one on the end is
because of
lost
turning
no matter
radius.
what.
Already lost.
Yeah, then you don't.
It's already gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's taking advantage of it.
Yeah, but if it was anywhere else, you'd have to have the other,
You'd have to have the other.
aisle, yeah.
so one of the conditions is to move the handicap space.
Or how about we just say to ensure that the handicap spaces comply? And if you can if you find that one worse somehow.
There's nothing inherently wrong with, you know, in your shopping
There's no
center,
accessible
across the
direct
road.
accessible route, he has to go out into the traffic way to get to the doorway. How is that accessible?
No different than a parking lot at Walmart.
Sure it is, because those are always in the.
I'm not arguing for it, I'm just saying that I don't know that it's necessarily illegal because it's done all the time in parking lots all over everywhere.
It is different.
Like that now, I hate that term, like that now.
What?
Just make sure it complies.
We will do that.
Yeah.
Leave it up to the designer to figure it out. He's gonna stamp it. But it just, to me, I would never do that. It just doesn't. Not a usable handicap space. Accessible space.
Well, not compliant, right?
It's not safe. I think it's solved by putting it in the 2 spot.
All right, so is finding 3 okay, Jesse? Based on what you
Yes, finding 3 is,
just went through the numbers? Okay.
so, I don't think anything changes with finding 4, 5, or 6.
There's a typo in 7 on the second line at the end.
Yeah, we got that driveway will.
We
Typo
are-
4.
The driveway will provide for additional drop-off area and provide for 5 additional parking spaces.
Yep.
Well, is it 5?
Right?
Yeah, he's got 5 in the front.
Oh, I think it's 4 because you
It's
lost
4
one.
now.
It's 4 plus the drop off.
We've added 5 spaces along the north, but we've lost 1 space in the parking lot because of the turnaround,
Okay.
the fire truck turnaround.
So it'll be a total of 51.
1, 2, 3.
51.
1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, 50 or 51?
51 with, that includes. the-
Calling the drop off a space. Is that the?
No,
Is
the
that-
drop-off is not a space.
What's happening is that we're saying that the 5 spaces up front add 4 additional ones because we lost one somewhere else. It's confusing. Can we just say that there are 5 spaces off the driveway and that we've lost one in the parking lot?
Yes.
Works for me.
We don't have to
Right.
say the last one.
The difference is that this plan that we looked at had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus a drop zone. Now, we have up here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no drop zone.
The drop zone is at the curb.
Yeah. So, but now we do have 3 handicap spaces, right? Not 2
Yep.
in this? Did you get that?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's also another bike rack that's proposed near the drop-off area. So we can add that at the end of that paragraph.
By the last parking spot.
This one?
The bike rack is provided near the building entrance and
Off of
parallel
off of
parking
the exit roadway.
in the driveway.
Okay, so you do have the condition that they provide a photometric plan?
Yep.
So finding 8, I'm assuming there's no longer the plan for a reading area.
Right.
So the we've only seen 1 landscape plan at this point, so,
I believe that's condition 6, not condition 7.
We're in the findings section on page 3 of 8 is the findings where.
Right, number 9. Proposed, trees proposed to be relocated shall be done so in accordance with the tree warden's recommendation as indicated in condition 7 during construction. I believe it should be condition 6.
Correct.
Just a cross-reference.
And then that next section, Jess, that's not a finding, correct? Condition,
The next,
sentence, the applicant shall.
yeah, I mean, I was just noting that
Yeah.
there's an additional condition. Do you wanna take that out?
It's in both.
Yeah, it's redundant.
We can take it out.
Take it out.
Sure.
Charlie? Yeah.
So we ask for
Yeah.
a little latitude to refine the landscaping as we go forward.
Yeah, what do you look, what would you like to propose?
Oh, we, you know, this road is newly developed and you know, there'll probably be some refinement that we'll present to either through the planning department or the tree warden.
So one of the conditions we have in here is condition number 2, does that,
So we-
That addresses the revised
To the-
landscape plan
that'll-
on page 4.
does that work for you?
That's fine.
That's fine.
In condition 6, Jesse, just to get rid of the dog in front of fire department.
What are we gonna do with, condition number 3?
I think it's fine. Is there anything you want to add to it that you feel needs to be added? Based on,
We just wanted to make sure.
on the lighting, do we want to include a comment about, needs to be shut off by close of business, or is that?
Well, I guess, right, in the back, maybe you all can help, in the parking lot in the back is lit 24 hours, correct? I mean, safety lighting. But there's no lighting in the front right now except for regular street lighting, more or less?
Well, nobody.
I don't think the parking lot light is on the light. The neighbors can probably verify
It's probably midnight to,
I think a big one on Deering, I think, is on all night, the big glary one.
Maybe,
Yeah, the bright one. Oh, yeah, there's the lights up the parking lot.
Yeah.
Mounted.
The reason why I was asking that,
Yeah.
you know,
Deering, right?
there,
And then there's some on the building.
there's really two different areas here.
Right.
Right, I can see a desire to have some lighting in the back, some, as we've called it before, security lighting.
Yep.
In the back, in the parking lot, as desired by the police department.
Right.
But, lighting in the front, would it be possible to have them on different, different circuits, different,
I don't see why not. We could have I can't speak for the electrical engineers, but I would assume that we could have two astronomical clocks, one geared for the front, one geared for the back, and we can look at the potential for dimming as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know the specific answer of what's possible.
So why don't we put that in as a recommendation, that could be worked into the lighting plan?
Very occasionally, teens do collect around there and get loud and do things.
It's pretty dark.
Yeah, so.
We see it from our.
They do it in my house too.
I'd recommend, that, you know, we certainly allow some flexibility to talk to the police chief, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
obviously, he's not here, so we shouldn't.
So I think the balance, I think the balance you're trying to strike
Restrictions.
is between safety and
Yeah.
neighbors' concerns, and we don't need to figure that out here, we'd rather have you figure it out
We'll
with.
engineer the flexibility, it sounds like we can do that, but obviously the policy
Right.
decision of
Right.
when they're on and off have to be flexible.
Right.
Okay, there's a question after the COO about snow storage.
Where are you?
Page 7 of 8.
Well, there's already a statement of finding,
Yeah.
number 12 on page 4. Snow will
Still-
be removed off-site by Reading DPW.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
eliminate that.
So, the question,
Wait, you're gonna eliminate that?
We could. I mean, if it's already
Well,
in
what's the
there.
policy? Who takes care of it?
DPW removes it. Yeah.
Yep.
so there's no need for the,
Yep, well, they will. I believe we do now.
No, they
I thought we were gonna.
I think the last bit of it just now.
Yeah. I stand corrected.
It's a big one.
We have had conversations with DPW, and they do recognize that they will need to remove the snow
Okay,
from the site.
okay.